All right, we're good.
Great. So I call this the 9th meeting of the 63rd session to order at 7:04 p.m. on September 30th. We have taken roll call as people have arrived into the meeting. Clerk Fox, would you mind reading how many people are present and what each vote requirement is?
There are 42 senators present. Simple majority is 22. 2/3 of those who are present are 29, and 2/3 of Senate as a whole is 45.
Thank you, Clerk Fox. We can now, for those of you who are new, who have not been sworn in, we will now move into the swearing in. So if you have already been sworn in, please turn off your camera and keep yourself muted. Great. Gabe, can you share your screen? Thank you. So if you are a new senator, please raise your right hand and repeat after me. I state your name, hereby swear
I, Jacob Kress, hereby swear
that I will faithfully serve
that I will faithfully serve
the students of Wichita State University,
the students of Wichita State University,
act in accordance with
act in accordance with
the Constitution of the student body,
the Constitution of the student body,
and fulfill all duties and responsibilities.
and fulfill all duties and responsibilities
Gabe, you have to scroll. Required of the office of
required of the office of
I will,
I will,
to the best of my ability,
to the best of my ability,
preserve, protect, and defend
preserve, protect, and defend
the Constitution of the student body of Wichita State University.
the Constitution of the student body of Wichita State University.
Thank you all very much. Congratulations. You are now officially senators in the 63rd session. We will now move into public forum. So public forum provides a chance for individuals to have the privilege of speaking before the Senate. This is a time for the association to listen to what the community has to say, and to that we offer our undivided respect and attention. I would like to remind everyone that although we allow the speakers the privilege to use this platform, the opinions of the speakers do not necessarily reflect the opinions of the association or the university. Lastly, in the essence of time, we do limit speeches in public forum to a length of 3 minutes, unless the speaker has spoken to us about it ahead of time. We do have someone who is here to speak in public forum today. Today, I would like to welcome Acting President Dr. Rick Mumma. He was invited originally for next week to talk about the contact tracing order that is in effect at the university and how that affects students and our lives, and kind of further explain that better. But as we all know, something major happened at the university on Friday, and Dr. Mumma now serves as both the president, or as the acting president, and as the provost. So I ask that we do ask questions and we do engage with him on the topic of contact tracing, but again, he is here to talk to us about whatever we would like to ask him questions on. I do know he is unable to speak about the details surrounding Dr. Golden's decision to resign. So in order to respect both his time and our time, I ask that you do not ask any questions about Dr. Golden's decision to resign, but you can ask as many questions you would like about what Dr. Mumma will do as acting president, anything like that. So just to respect our time, please respect that. So without further ado, Dr. Mumma, the floor is yours. Thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you, Speaker. Thank you all for allowing me to be here to talk with you. I'd just like to say a few things. And I also want to thank President Kahn for asking me to address you all tonight, not just about COVID-19, but also former President Golden's resignation. And I want to make sure everybody knows how much we appreciate former President Golden's dedication, hard work during his time at WSU, and we all wish him much success in his future endeavors. And we are all, including myself, are committed to moving forward and not looking in the rearview mirror. I know this is hard right now, but I would encourage you to consider this as a path. As I said with the Faculty Senate on Monday, we're an institution that exists for students of yesterday, today, and tomorrow, and we do not exist, succeed, or fail because of one person. And we have faced transition before, and I'm reminded of the resilience of our entire campus almost daily as we adjusted to COVID-19 during these past months. We know what it's like to navigate through the unexpected and how to turn challenge into growth. I know you're especially concerned about the status of the initiatives that we're working on, particularly the student initiatives. And over the coming weeks, we'll be evaluating how best to move forward. But many of them will likely continue. And I've spoken with President Khan about some of the spaces that we're programming right now that student government is involved in, and those are still on track to continue. I don't know how long I'll be in this role, but in it or not, and as provost, if I'm not in that role, I am committed to open, honest conversations and the continued engagement in shared governance, and that includes working with you all. I can only control my behavior, and as long as I am in a position to influence others in this regard, this will continue. I have been in communication with President Khan and other students since President Golden's resignation, and I will continue to have those conversations and interactions as we go forward. So I'd be happy to answer any questions about this particular issue, the questions that I can answer. As the speaker pointed out, for privacy purposes, I don't have the information from the Board of Regents anyway, so I wouldn't be able to provide it if I could. But it's a personal issue, and we cannot talk about that to respect Jay Golden's privacy. And I'll also be happy to answer any questions about COVID or whatever else is on your mind.
Thank you very much, Dr. Mumma. Are there any questions for the acting president? Senator Mounts.
So how are you going to use your current position as acting president to ensure that the new process to pick a new president is going to be open and accessible for students and not controlled by outside interests of the university?
Well, let me just explain how, I'm assuming you're asking about the next search for president. And I want to let you know that even though this search, which was a closed search, which produced Dr. Golden as a candidate, the Student Government Association had input in that. The Student Government Association president sat on that search committee. And there was opportunities at open forums for students to meet with the search committee and the Student Government Association president at the time to provide that feedback. I can't imagine that won't be the case going forward, because it always has been my experience, whether it's a closed or open search. I want you also to understand that I understand that they value more of an open search, but it doesn't mean that in any of those kind of searches that the campus gets to decide who the next president is. That is up to the Board of Regents. They hire presidents. Presidents are employed by the Kansas Board of Regents. They're not employees of Wichita State University. And so they have every right, it's laid out in their policies and bylaws, to do whatever they think is the right thing in terms of hiring a president. So I will continue to advocate as much as I can to make sure that you all have input into the selection of the next president, and you know, whatever I can do in terms of my role now as acting president and provost. So hopefully that answers your question.
Thank you, Dr. Mumma. Senator Liu, your question.
So this is regarding COVID and contact tracing. Currently, what policies and procedures are in place to allow the school to do contact tracing for those who have tested positive on campus, such as in campus housing? And if not, are there plans in place to advocate to allow the school to do contact tracing internally?
Okay, good question. And I know this has been an issue among several of you, not just you here on this call, but other students as well. I just want to kind of back up a little bit to explain why we are not currently doing contact tracing. And Kansas House Bill 2016, which was signed into law on June 8, 2020, created the COVID-19 Contact Tracing Privacy Act, which prohibits state entities like the university from performing any contact tracing activities unless those tracers are trained and authorized by the Secretary of Health and Environment or the local health officer to conduct contact tracing. As a state entity, Wichita State is subject to this legislation and therefore prohibited by law from notifying any student or employee or visitor or any potential known exposure, even in general terms. When we started evaluating this law, we actually wanted to do contact tracing for our students who particularly those living in housing. And we met with our local health department, and at that time it was decided that they were not comfortable allowing any outside entities to do contact tracing. So I do want you to know, though, that all positive cases that we actually test on this campus are reported to the health department, and they do the contact tracing. And you have to understand too, pre-COVID, there's all kinds of other communicable diseases that fall into contact tracing. This is not a new thing. I'm a healthcare provider, a clinician. That's where I started my career. And as a clinician, I had to abide by that as well. So if someone had a communicable disease that was subject to contact tracing, like tuberculosis, and we have tuberculosis in our environment, that would be handled the same way. So it's to protect privacy, it's to make sure there's a process that's gone through, it's to prevent people from overreacting to such, learning about such cases of positivity in their situation. But I'm assuring you that the Sedgwick County Health Department and the Kansas Department of Health and Environment are actively currently engaged in managing positive cases through their contact tracing program.
Thank you, Dr. Mumma. Senator Eyrig.
Thank you for being with us. So I know before we opened, there was a lot of concern about how many cases would we have? Would campus become a hotspot? So compared to other universities our size, we've been relatively low in our number of cases. So I'm interested from your perspective, and more necessarily as a provost and on an academic level, how is the fact that we have been able to keep a low number of cases affecting your planning for the spring semester? Are we looking at opening up a little bit more maybe than we are right now, or are you guys still very hesitant to move any further than we're at right now?
Yeah, so good question. Thank you for that question. So yeah, we do have relatively low numbers in the 50s, I believe, is what was reported today on the dashboard for COVID-19. And that, I think the main reason for that is that we have a fairly decentralized student body. We don't have a lot of students living in housing. We don't have a lot of students living in Greek housing. Most of our students, live out in the community. So that's the difference. But we do have community spread still in Sedgwick County. And we're following what Sedgwick County is telling others in the community to do. And at the present time, it's still in our best interest and your best interest if we continue planning for the spring semester similarly to the fall semester. So as you know, the in-person activities end on November 20th, the Friday before Thanksgiving. You all have a week off of Thanksgiving, and then there's 4 more instructional days, and those are moved to remote learning entirely, and then there's final exams. And then we won't have students come back for the regular spring semester until February 1st. We do have a January term that we are going to also put in place. Now, we've always had a 2-week pre-session in January, and this is going to be moved to a 4-week session. So there will be opportunities for students to take classes over a 4-week period in an online format. And the reason why we did all that shifting, and the reason why we're continuing to plan for hybrid, which is a mix between in-person, online, face-to-face, and then totally 100% online, is that we still have community spread, and then we have the added complication of seasonal flu. We don't know what the effect of that is currently. So we need to do our best to prevent as much congregation as we can given our current situation. And that reminds me, if you haven't got your flu shot, please do that because COVID-19 and seasonal flu have similar symptoms. So those flu shots are available in student health. They're also available at Dillon's and Walgreens and lots of other places in the city. So to answer your question, we're going to continue on in the same kind of format that we are currently involved in now here in the fall semester.
Thank you, Dr. Mumma. Senator Gums, your question?
Good evening, Dr. Mumma. So my question revolves more on job security of those on campus. So if for any unfortunate reason, a faculty member, or even specifically a student employee, or even any lower members to those who work for Chartwells or those who work janitorial staff, if unfortunately they contracted the virus and have to sit out for those 2 weeks when their contracts are based on an hourly period, do they still have the security of getting paid for those couple weeks that they're out, especially knowing most of the times this is one of their few streams of income? And how are the rest of the workers are treated to make sure that they themselves did not contract the illness as well? And then of course, more protection policies for them as well.
Well, let me try to answer your first part of your question, which you're concerned about job security for students working on campus. Now remember, there's different kinds of employment relationships on campus. Those that are working in the RSC are employed differently than those working for academic department. And I'll just have to refer you to your department supervisor how that's managed. There may be opportunities for a student worker, and let's say just use my office because we have student workers. If they have to be put in quarantine, we would probably have the ability to allow them to do some work remotely while they're in quarantine. And that might be the case in many offices. So I can't answer exactly how that will be handled in, for instance, in some of the food service areas in Chartwells. But I know that they'd be willing to answer those questions for you and to see how that would be handled. So it'd be handled in various different ways. And so what was your second part of your question?
Safety measures, just basically safety measures for the rest of the employees.
So you mean, are those safety measures expected for all employees? Or?
Yeah, so for example, if one person contracted the virus, what safety measures are in place for the rest of the employees to make sure, do they also have to go through the same lengthy quarantine period, et cetera, et cetera?
Well, that all depends on contact tracing. So when someone is found to be positive, then that's reported to the health department and then they investigate that. And just keep in mind though, if everybody, let's just say you're working in a food service area and everybody's wearing a mask, everybody's social distancing, everybody's engaged in hygiene, good sanitizing practices, and they're not around someone for more than 10 minutes in an unprotected way, those individuals may not be considered a true contact and they may not be required to be tested. It really depends on the situation. So I can't really give you a definitive answer on that because it really depends on what the contact tracers find out in terms of how they were and what kind of relationship they were in their work environment. But not everybody would be tested or required to go into quarantine. It just depends.
Thank you, Dr. Mumma, and thank you, Senator Gums, for your question. Senator Sines, your question.
Yeah, excuse me. Thank you for your time. So I know that Dr. Jay Golden was a huge advocate on trying to create a more inclusive campus. He and as long as other students have preached that Wichita State does a great job at being diverse. However, when it comes to being inclusive, that we don't do the best of jobs. I was wondering, even though your tenure may not be very long, we're not sure how long your tenure is going to be. What can you tell us of what initiatives will be taking place and are taking place to make sure that this campus will be more inclusive?
Well, thank you for the question. I know that many of you don't know me very well, but I started out as a faculty member here, and one of my research areas was around diversity issues and inclusion issues for healthcare providers. That's my background. So if you go back and Google me, you'll find all kinds of research associated with that. And that's just who I am as a person also. Those of you who know me well will know that. I started, along with my partner, the first ever LGBTQ scholarship for students here on campus, the Equality Scholarship. So I think that points to my commitment, at least in those things that I just mentioned. We have several things that are going on right now. We have a task force that had been formed this past spring around diversity and inclusion, and those individuals are still gathering. And right now there's a search for a VP for workforce diversity, professional development, and human resources. At the moment, that is continuing to go forward. I do want you to know that there has been no budget identified at this point, and there never was any budget identified to actually complete that hire. So I'm waiting on the results of the search to identify the direction we will go for that. We are understanding of the importance of that search, but that is a little bit of a hurdle as we prepare for significant budget cuts going into the next fiscal year. So I'm just putting that out there so that you understand that individual, if hired, would be in charge of putting together diversity and inclusion plans for the campus in terms of workforce issues. We also, as you know, have a very robust, I think, Office of Diversity and Inclusion that's working on these kinds of issues on a daily basis. We also know that you all are interested in having a multicultural center here on campus at some point that will help further that. And that is part of the planning process for an extension to the RSC or some sort of facility like that. So those discussions are going to continue to move forward. And then we also have our Chief Diversity Officer, Dr. Marcia Fleming Randall, who represents us to the Board of Regents in terms of those issues as well, and that will continue for the time being. And then we have a whole bunch of other different groups on campus that are working on various things. We established a Latinx studies area last year. My office supported the hiring of the person who leads that, Dr. Adele Torres Rivera. And we just received $1 million grant from the Camarena family to help recruit more students from diverse backgrounds, to develop programming for inclusion for all students, to help us hire faculty in the Latinx area to further develop that cluster, and to also help hire a recruitment coordinator in our Office of Admissions focused around diversity and inclusion issues. In addition, that gift is also helping us leverage resources that Dr. Hall has available in her division to hire an additional individual in the Office of Diversity and Inclusion. So I want to let you know that I realize that Jay Golden was very interested in this particular issue, but we all are interested in that issue and have been for a number of years. So I want you to know that we're committed. We've been committed. We're going to continue to be committed going forward.
Thank you, Dr. Mumma. Senator Day, your question.
Sorry, thank you, Dr. Mumma. My question has to do with the rate of testing on campus. So basically, I'm aware this is partly because the campus is more decentralized. Not everyone takes class on campus. I'm aware that's part of the issue. But I have noticed that of the students on campus who have been tested, it is 1,718 students have been tested total for coronavirus. A relatively small percentage have tested positive. But the fact is, we don't know of a large portion of the student body in terms of, including the students who have shown up to campus to attend classes, in terms of how they test. And I know it's a complicated issue. Would you be willing to share some perspective on what the university is doing to attempt to increase the rate of testing, if that is at all desirable?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I have several things to tell you about that we're working on in that area. First of all, I want to let you know that we're standing up a COVID-19 testing facility in South Wichita. I was there over the weekend. I tweeted about it. You can go and read about that and see pictures of it. And that's all basically built out now and fully equipped with the equipment. And they'll start testing next week to start slowly testing next week to to calibrate the equipment and make sure it's valid and so forth. And then it should be up in full force by the end of October, first part of November. So that's a development that will allow for mass testing, not just for us, but also for the community. The whole point of it is, and it's supported by the Sedgwick County Health Department, or excuse me, just Sedgwick County in general and the state of Kansas. They've given resources to purchase the equipment and stand up the lab and then do testing. But it's to help the community, including our community, to determine the health status through testing through this COVID-19 lab. So that's a very positive thing. And that's Wichita State in partnership with College of Health Professions and our National Institute for Aviation Research and their expertise in robotics, because that technology is utilized to do mass testing. So that's one of a kind, state-of-the-art facility. So in terms of our current testing plans, I want you to be aware that the Center for Disease Control and Prevention still is only recommending that we test those that are symptomatic or have known exposure. They do not recommend testing asymptomatic individuals unless there's community spread, and we do have that. And if there is resources available for that, which we are going to have. I meet weekly with a group of faculty from the Department of Public Health Sciences, who are epidemiologists, public health experts. I also have a public health background. And we are in the process now of putting together a surveillance testing plan where we would randomly select a segment of the student population, representative of undergraduate, grad, non-degree bound students, basically anybody who has the potential for in-person contact on campus. And hopefully we'll have that up and running in the next couple of weeks. Again, it'll be a random sample. We're thinking about 5%, taking 5% of our population and randomly selecting based on those parameters I just laid out, which will be about 625 students a week, or excuse me, we're going to do it every 2 weeks. So that's where we're heading. We'll do that through the end of the semester. We were given $2.4 million through the CARES Act money that came from the federal government to help pay for that. We do have to spend most of it, or pretty much all of it, by the end of this calendar year. But I heard yesterday on a call that I was on with the presidents of all the KBOR institutions, on that call, the Secretary of Health and Environment in Kansas they're trying to get an extension to allow us to be able to use those dollars into the next semester. So to answer your question, yes, we've just been focusing on housing students, those that are symptomatic, those that have a known exposure, athletes, and any student who has a patient-facing experience, like on a clinical rotation, because that's what's recommended. But we know that in order to get a better handle on that, particularly in this community that still does have community spread, we're planning on expanding that. So stay tuned for more information on how that will be, how that will affect you. Just please understand that it's going to be a randomized process. So people will be randomly selected every 2 weeks to be tested. It won't be a process unless you're symptomatic or had a known exposure where you could request a test. And that's best practices in public health testing.
Thank you, Dr. Mumma. Senator Kirk, your question.
Yes, so I've gone around to a lot of different sources to ask this question, but so when we are in the RSC, or any student is in the RSC eating, I know and understand that it is okay at that point to not have a mask on, because obviously you're eating and drinking. As soon as you're done, that's when you put it back on. Who are the people that enforce that? Because I myself I have a compromised immune system, and when I'm in there and eating, I need to breathe and eat. And I've had people come up to me that look official, have a name tag on, and tell me that I need to put my mask back on. So I'd like to know exactly what the policy is behind that. Additionally, what are the ramifications of someone that does not want to listen to that?
The ramification of someone who does not want to wear a mask, a face covering?
Yes, sir.
So if it's a student, that information can be sent to or can be dealt with through the student code of conduct, through the office that manages that. And so if you come across individuals who do that, you need to notify them and let them know. If it's an employee, that's handled through human resources. But everybody is required to wear a face covering unless they're sitting down eating or drinking or in their office alone. So we have ways of managing that. You know, it does require all of us to be diligent about that. And I see people all the time who aren't wearing a face covering, and I point to my face covering and say, "Where's your face covering?" 9 times out of 10, that works, and they put it on. You all need to do that as well. All of us are responsible for this. So in terms of you requiring some sort of exception, that is handled. We do have a policy about that, and I believe that Dr. Hall is on this call, and if she could remind me, I'm drawing a blank right now, or Gabe, if you could remind me what that process is. But we do have a process for individuals like you that are compromised, and there's some extra precautions that need to be taken care of. But in the case I imagine that you would want to be wearing your face covering at all times and being around people that have their face covering around all times, not to not wear your face covering.
Yeah, so what we've been told in our meetings with the reintegration teams, we're directing students to the Office of Disability Services in order to register it with them, and then they can help you kind of guide you through the process of utilizing that policy as well.
Yeah, I thought it was disability services, but I didn't want to say that without verifying. Thank you, Gabe.
Of course.
Thank you. Senator Eyrig, your question.
Just to clarify on something that you said earlier. So among that 600 or so people that are randomly selected every 2 weeks, will that testing, should my name come up, for example, and I decline testing, is that mandatory? And what is the, or what are the possible ramifications of, say I hypothetically opted to not take that test?
Yeah, and that's good. I should have pointed that out. That's a great question. Let me just be clear. We're randomly selecting 5% of our student population. So it's basically those students who have some sort of activity potentially on campus. And that's about 12,000 students, because we have a lot of online students. We have students who are taking classes at other sites that never come to class. So there's about 4,000 other students that we won't be testing, and we're taking 5% of those, randomly selecting those, and that's about 625 students a week or every 2 weeks. And it's all opt-in, so it's not required. We want to try to test as many of those as possible. So Dr. Hall has told me that she is she's found some incentives to try to encourage students to test. We think we would get anywhere between 30 and 40% of students without incentives, so it might increase to 50% if we do that. But even in that case, that still would be a pretty good sample every 2 weeks, and we would continue to do that. And only take those students out that have a positive or have been quarantined for the next drawing of the random sample.
Thank you, Dr. Mumma. Senator Liu, your question.
I have 2 questions. So starting with the first one, regarding the 5% of the random sample, let's say let's say I went to someplace which is considered high risk and I come back. Would there be a way to opt into the random sample, or would it be completely random and I would have to self-quarantine to make sure I am not exposed to COVID?
Yeah, so basically you'd have to self-quarantine. We're not, unless you're symptomatic or you have a known exposure, we would just recommend that you quarantine.
Thanks. And then for the second question regarding the mandatory face mask policy, do you know of the exceptions that the Office of Disability Services allows regarding face masks? And say a student qualifies for these exceptions, would they be allowed to go into the RSC without a face covering or attend on-campus activities?
It just really depends. The most likely they're not going to be allowed to go in places where individuals are, congregating, or going to be encouraged not to do that. But just some examples, maybe respiratory problems that prevents them from wearing a face covering. There may be some mental health issues that also may be part of that. It just really depends on the individual.
Thank you. Senator Gums, your question.
I apologize if you mentioned this already, but in regards of testing at the new testing center, I know you've mentioned that they're only really focusing on those who show symptoms. But for example, so this is a personal example as well. So as I'm an international student, and I know a lot of us will be leaving the country during the winter break since it's so long. And a lot of us have to present negative tests to enter the countries that we're going to. So even if we don't show any symptoms, would we be able to still get tested so we could be able to travel?
Yeah, I'll have to look into that because that's a question that hasn't come up. It's possible, but we'll look into that.
Thank you. Senator Day, your question.
Yes, this is a little bit of a broad question, but in terms of enrollment and the number of and the budget cuts, I'm aware of a story I read in the Sunflower a few weeks ago about buybacks for certain faculty and staff who are retire early in exchange for buybacks. I guess my broad question is, what is the university's approach to like layoffs and buybacks and whatnot, and how bad do you think the budget cuts are going to be, and how does enrollment factor into that very broadly?
So let me just talk a little bit about overall where we are in terms of budget. So right now in fiscal year 21, we're okay. We're not, it's not like we're just flush with cash. But one of the things that made things better this year, this current fiscal year, is that the end of last fiscal year, we were able to sweep some dollars that were not being spent because of the university was basically shut down. So people weren't traveling, we weren't purchasing, so we're able to save about $3 million and utilize it this fiscal year. We also got some CARES Act dollars as well that helped with that. For next fiscal year, that's the big problem. We have a projected $1.2 billion shortfall in the state of Kansas next fiscal year. That might change depending on how well we control the virus in the state and how well the economy continues to do. But we're being told to plan for about a 10% cut starting fiscal year 22. And some of the things that we have done to give us some flexibility next year is that we're offering a voluntary retirement program. Actually, those that are 62 and older are eligible. There's some other criteria that they have to meet as well. And we'll start reviewing those applications next week to determine whether we can accept their application or not. Not everybody would be allowed to take that, depending on a lot of different factors. So that will give us some flexibility if when those individuals actually retire, and they will do that at the end of December. It doesn't mean that all departments who have people retire will lose those positions, because in some cases we need to staff appropriately and not put the university at risk. But a lot of the individuals who are eligible to retire, they're usually long-term employees or higher because they worked here for a number of years. Their pay is higher. And if they do retire, in a lot of cases, we will be able to hire people back at an entry-level salary and still get some salary savings. I'm not sure what you mean by pullbacks or buybacks. Is that what you're talking about, this voluntary program?
Yeah, that's what I was talking about.
Yeah. So we're utilizing that as a tool to help us have some flexibility going into fiscal year 22. It's going to be a challenge. 10%, if you just take it all out off of employee positions, about 130 positions, averaging about $80,000 per position. So that's positions. What that means is that we're going to have to take some cuts in positions, or not hiring new positions after people retire.
Thank you, Dr. Mumma. Senator Thompson, your question will be our last one for this evening for Dr. Mumma.
All right. In terms of budget, how might the losses due to COVID-19 affect the search for our next president?
I don't think it would affect it at all. You know, a university is required to have a president. We can't be accredited by our accrediting body without a president. So we have funding allocated to pay the president's salary, and that will continue. Now, it could mean that if budget cuts were severe enough that we wouldn't be able to pay the president as much as the last president. That's possible. So, you know, there's always that chance, but that would be the case for any of us that currently work at the university. But there's no chance of not hiring another president. We have to have a president in order to be accredited. And the reason why it's important for our accreditation is you all can't receive federal financial aid if you are recipients of that without an institution being accredited. There's lots of checks and balances there.
All right, thank you very much, Dr. Mumma, for coming to speak with us this evening. If anyone does have any more questions, you can send them to me and I can send them to Dr. Mumma. I'm sure he would take your questions. He tends to answer my emails, so.
Yeah. So you can send me direct email directly too.
Yeah, so thank you very much, Dr. Mumma. We really appreciate you being here. We can now move on to the next section of our meeting.
Thank you.
Thank you. So we will now move on to item 4, approval of the minutes. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes?
Motion to approve last week's minutes.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Senator Scheer with the second. All those in favor, please click yes on your screen. Still waiting on people to click yes. All right, with 40 in favors, 0 against, and 7 abstentions, that passes. We can now move on to item 5, approval of the agenda. Do we have any motions, Senator Hull?
Yes, I motion to remove item G, funding bill 63-011, to pull it back to committee. We found a discrepancy, and so we need to work on that before we move forward.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Senator Kirk with the second. You can please click yes or no on your screen to vote whether or not we should remove FB-63-001 to allow the Budget and Finance Committee to fix the discrepancy. With 42 in favor and 5 abstentions, 0 against and 5 abstentions, this passes. We will now remove item G from our agenda. Are there any other motions regarding the agenda? Great, I'm looking for a motion to approve the agenda.
Motion to approve the agendas for this week.
Senator Kirk with the motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Senator Mounts with a second. Please go ahead and click yes. I'm sorry, you could click no too if you wanted to. That's on me. Bad wording on my part. If you wanted to click no, you could. With 40 in favor, 0 against, 42 in favor, 42 in favor, 0 against, and 5 abstentions. This passes. As there are no items in the consent agenda, we will now move into unfinished business. Item A, the clerk will read.
Item A is FB 63-008, Simon Berhini, individual funding, introduced by Senator Sahani Jitten for herself. Objective is to authorize the allocation of $100 to Simon Berhini for an engineering conference. Refer to Committee of the Whole from Budget and Finance. It's vote required is simple majority.
As we finished the questioning period on this item last week, we can now move into debate on this item. Is there anyone who would like to speak in affirmation of this funding bill? Seeing none, is there anyone who would like to speak in negation against this funding bill? Senator Majors.
Will a motion to pass with unanimous consent of the Senate?
A motion to pass by unanimous consent. Are there any objections to this motion? Please raise your hand. Seeing none, this bill passes by unanimous consent. We can now move into new business. Item A, the clerk will read.
Item A is SB 63-059, the Scholarship Committee Transferal Act, introduced by Senator Crystal Zacharias, along with Chairperson Mackie Hull, Senator John Kirk, Senator Jacob Tubach, and Senator Sahani Jitten for themselves. The objective is the Scholarship Committee Transferal Act shall serve to amend Article 1 and subsequent statutes of the Association bylaws to transfer the duties and responsibilities of the Association scholarships from the Standing Committee on Academic Affairs to the Standing Committee on Budget and Finance. This act will clarify the duties of each committee and put all financial dues of the association under the Committee on Budget and Finance, as well as move the allocation duties of the McKinney-Vento Scholarship to the Association Hardship Fund Committee. This is referred to Committee of the Whole from Ways and Means. This is the first read, so no vote is required.
Senator Zacharias, would you like to give an authorship speech or any of the other authors?
I will go ahead. So this will basically move the scholarship duties from academics to budget and finance. We think that budget and finance can handle this since the treasurer is now a separate entity and we have our own budget and finance chair, leaving budget and finance committee to be able to do more. This also would just clarify things, make sure all financial decisions for the association are under this committee, as well as move the McKinney-Vento Scholarship that is for homeless students under the Hardship Committee. That way that sensitive information isn't disclosed.
Thank you, Senator Zacharias. Do we have any questions for the author about this bill? Please raise your hand. Seeing none, the questioning period for this bill is closed. We will move into the debate and voting period on this item next week. We can now move on to item B. The clerk will read.
Which is SB 63-060, Supreme Court Reconciliation and Management Act, introduced by Senator Mounts, Senator Thomas, Senator Lozano, Senator Smith, and Chairperson Majors for themselves. The objective is the Supreme Court Reconciliation and Management Act works to eliminate concerning and redundant wording surrounding the nature and duties of the Supreme Court. This act will make Section 3 of the bylaws, which concerns the court and its duties as well as the duties of its members. This is referred to Committee of the Whole from Ways and Means. This is the first read, so no vote is required.
Thank you, Clerk Fox. Would a member of the Ways and Means Committee like to give an authorship speech?
I can do that. So the main point of this bill is to actually establish in Article 3, under the current bylaws, the language there is more of a placeholder put on by past, I believe it was past Supreme Court justices. However, in the point of this act is to fully solidify, first of all, that information that is in there, as well as make some adjustments to what was written and how the court actively works right now. So we did make some changes. You can read through them in the bill, of course. I would highly suggest before next meeting, you read this bill and compare it as well to what was originally written in the Constitution to see what changes were made. Because this is brand new, so you can't see anything that has been changed on this. But if there is anything you all have any questions about or you need to know, you can ask me. I'm not going to go too much into this because it is a big bill. So I'm not going to like read through it word by word, but I am open for any questions if anyone has any.
Are there any questions for the authors of this bill? Senator Day.
Yes. I have a question about something early in the bill. So basically, the bill indicates that the other justices of the Supreme Court will select the Chief Justice. Is there a reason that is the case instead of what's done, like for example, at the U.S. Supreme Court, where the president nominates a justice and the Senate will confirm or whatnot? What are the benefits of that arrangement compared to this arrangement?
I believe the current arrangement for the Supreme Court is that they just elect their own Chief Justice. If people do have an issue with that, I am open to changing it. However, I currently do not see an issue, noting that it is most likely that in the Supreme Court, there's going to be only a handful of people who do have experience at any one time or have significant experience. So I think it's only fair that they have that option of basically becoming the Chief Justice, especially because I don't think us as the Senate, with as disconnected as we are from the Supreme Court, is really our purview to nominate said Chief Justice and to confirm them. I think that should be up to the court themselves personally. However, I would not be opposed to changing that process if other senators do want to. But I don't think that was excuse me, that wasn't anything that we talked about in committee when we were writing this.
Senator Kirk, your question?
It was more so of a clarification. I don't see a problem with how it's written right now from what Senator Day said. However, I do see I see what he's saying. I think that if you could change it, I do agree that us as a Senate, we are we don't have the knowledge to put that person into power. I completely agree with that. But I do think that it should be changed in a way that it gives more of a direction towards somebody else instead of the people in there. Does that make sense?
Did you have a question, Senator Kirk?
Oh, yeah. Sorry. My question is it possible to, there we go. Is it possible to change it to be able to give power to someone else other than the Senate?
I believe so. Considering we're the ones who are crafting these bylaws, I don't know if there's a constitutional part to this as well. I can delve into that and I can look. That being said, if anyone is wanting to change it, you can do one of two things. Either you can email any of the authors on this list or email Chairperson Majors with your amendment. Otherwise, you can send that to me or even just make an amendment at the next meeting. And depending on how the feelings of the other authors, I would be open to just considering that as a friendly amendment. So we don't have to go through like a long, arduous process of voting and things like that. So if there are senators that are concerned and want to come talk to any of the authors or myself about this situation, I actually encourage you to reach out to me as soon as possible so we can get that information on here. But yeah, so that's the way I would go about it, if that makes any sense.
Advisor Fonseca, did you have comments?
Yes, Senator Mounds, you are correct. It does live in the Constitution. So this bill couldn't do it. You would have to, you would have to change the language to also amend the Constitution, and then the student body would have to vote on that before it could go into effect. So the selection of the Chief Justice exists in the Constitution.
Okay. Well, if anyone's into writing a bill to do that, I'm here for you to help.
Senator Liu, your question?
Yeah, I was just looking at the Constitution. I noticed in section 4 of the jurisdiction of the Supreme Court, it mentions it shall hear cases from the Traffic Court, Parking Appeals, and Library Court of Appeals. In the current legislation, it only mentions the Traffic Court and the process for that. Is it to be assumed that all of those mentioned in the Constitution will always like follow the same procedures as the Traffic Court mentioned in the Chapter 4, Section 3 of the bill?
Yeah, so when it comes to that, we're only doing bylaw changes here. We're not doing constitutional changes. So effectively, it doesn't really mean anything to have those in there, especially because I'm pretty sure it's the Library Court of Affairs or whatever it's called doesn't exist anymore. So we actually need to like write that out of the Constitution. So another bill idea right there, if y'all are interested. But yeah, those courts that we eliminated don't exist anymore. And so that's the reason why it's not included in this bylaw bill. That is something that we will look at, I'm assuming, to change in the future as well.
Thank you.
Senator Zacharias, your question?
Sorry. So I had a question about the clerk of the court position. I was wondering if they currently have a position like that, and if it has historically shown any problems being filled, and also how much of the duties that how the duties of the clerk are pivotal to the Supreme Court's running, and who would take on those responsibilities if it was vacant.
So I know specifically that not this session, but the last session, it was actually former Chief Justice Kat Berner that handled all of the clerk of the court stuff. That's one thing that actually, now that you bring up, is something that probably does need clarification. If I remember correctly, I believe Chief Justice Vicencio is on this call. If she might be able to, if she's allowed to, speak on that, on the actual position, if it's being filled and what it looks like. Because I don't serve on the court, so I don't particularly know and don't see that. Speaker Baumann, if she is allowed to do that, I would encourage it. Otherwise, we could always ask outside of the meeting.
Since she's here, Chief Justice, you can go ahead and answer that question if you have an answer to it.
Thank you, and hi everyone. Yes, we have elected a clerk this session. I can only speak to the previous session because that's the one that I was a member of. It was Kat Berner. It was a lot of work for the Chief Justice to do, so we selected Justice Loeffler to be in charge of that this session. That's one of the things that we're working on, is developing the consistency and the structure of the organization within the Supreme Court meetings, which we didn't necessarily have beforehand. So we are keeping meeting minutes, and we're going to be uploading them to Shocker Sync. So was there something else specific to the clerk position that you all had questions on?
I think that answered the question.
Okay.
All right, thank you, Chief Justice. Senator Day, your question?
Sorry, yeah. Basically, oh, I lost my place, but there is one section within the bill about closed meetings, where basically the court does not make quorum, so they meet in this private kind of thing. I'm a little unclear on that. Could you explain the reasoning behind that and why that was included?
Yes, I'm trying to remember the exact wording. Closed meetings, there it is. So they used to be called private meetings, and we figured that wasn't necessarily the right word for it, so we did change the wording to closed and open meetings. When it comes to closed meetings specifically, and again, this might be something that the Chief Justice can speak on. I know that a lot of the time they just need to meet to get over procedural stuff that isn't, or to go over information and other things like that, where they're not making any decisions whatsoever. And currently, as the court is set up, if there is a single justice missing, they don't meet quorum. because of the 2 additional faculty positions that currently sit on the Senate that are not filled. So this kind of allows the Supreme Court, at least for the time being, until we can get the Constitution changed, to be able to conduct like meetings that are all purely informational, or where there's not anything being like any decisions made. And so the whole goal behind these is to make the process as transparent as possible. So that's why we changed it from private meetings to closed meetings. But essentially, it's just to go over anything that's not particularly related to like a specific case.
Senator Liu, your question?
I have 2 questions. So for first question regarding the procedures of a court, I noticed there's nothing about how a hearing will be, like how the process of hearing will be done. So because there's nothing in the bill, would it be up to the discretion of the Chief Justice or the justices to decide how the meeting will be, how the hearings will be conducted?
Yes, I would assume so. And again, we can always include information in this, or we can always amend this specific bill, or even write another bill in the future to amend this part of the bylaws to include something like that. Personally, again, I don't think it's necessarily within the, I mean, again, anyone can argue with me on this, but I personally don't think it's within the purview of the Senate to be dictating how the Supreme Court meetings should be run, especially because they're the ones that know how the meetings run best. And so I think leaving that up to them to make that decision, I think is probably the best, because there are in general like rules they have to follow, but I don't think the execution nearly matters as much as long as they're following what is already in there about the court hearings. And so I feel like when we start assigning like duties and like procedural stuff to the Supreme Court, it is at least for me, we're overstepping our bounds as the Senate. And so that is why I personally did not include that in there.
Follow-up question to part under it. Would all court hearings be open where like members, any student or faculty may be sitting here on the court hearings?
I believe that is the case.
Okay. For that, if let's say the court is hearing traffic appeals or parking appeals, would there be FERPA conflicts regarding traffic and parking appeals?
I have no idea, Gabe.
So Senator Liu, to your point, and there's a couple of points that I want to clarify really quick on that, but I would make the argument yes, and we already have language within our record statute that could be utilized in circumstances like this. So I would strongly advise that we put language into this bylaw, into this section of the bylaws that allows for FERPA protected cases to be heard behind closed doors. We already have a practice like that with scholarships, with the academic committee allowed to close their meetings to discuss scholarships and make decisions behind closed doors. I would strongly advise, I can't imagine that traffic appeals has FERPA protected information, but you could also never know. So I would strongly advise that before next week, we include language that's similar to what we include for the Committee on Academic Affairs to allow them to close their doors, you know what I mean, to make decisions on cases that may relate to that. So that's one point. I think to the other point that Senator Mounds brought up earlier, I think, you know, he made a really good point of whatever the Senate doesn't regulate, it's up to the head of the branch to make a decision on. And so that's the one thing I think you need to remember, right? The same thing happens with the executive branch, same thing in the legislative branch. Whatever the Senate doesn't legislate, the speaker gets to decide on how to do that. And I would, without getting into the nitty gritty of step by step of how to have a Supreme Court hearing, I would say let's not get involved in that. Just as our bylaws don't give the Senate a step by step process of how to run a meeting. That's up to the person who chairs that meeting. And then there was another point, but I lost it, so I'm going to come back to it because it was an important point. Oh, I remember the technicality of that was mentioned earlier. Do keep in mind that, right, everything, regardless of whatever you put into language, whatever you pass into language, everything is bound by COMA and CORA, because that is what we are required to be bound by. Just as the Senate can go into executive session to have discussions about things and not make decisions on it, so can every other branch of government as well. So can any committee of the association, any branch, any commission, any board, they can call executive session to go into that. So theoretically, right, the technicality of them having their private meeting is the same method that the Senate can adopt when it goes into its private meetings to have discussions on things that are not making a decision on. So I think, right, the same privilege exists within that branch of government as well. But yes, that is all that I have.
Thank you, Senator Irish.
And real quick, if I will say, since you brought that up, Senator Liu, we will, at least I will be reaching out to the other authors to see how we want to word something in there to include for protections in the case that does come up. So that was something that I can guarantee will be in this bill next week.
Senator Ira, go ahead.
I just have a procedural question, actually. Since it sounds like there may be some pretty substantial changes being made in this bill just because of the comments that we've asked, will it have to go back for another read, or will we just vote on it like it has friendly amendments?
Yeah, so if there are amendments, they can either be sent to me in advance and I will change the bill format that I sent out for next week, or they can be amendments that are put on the floor that we can vote on to be added to the bill on the floor. So it doesn't have to go back to committee. We can just do it in the form of amendments.
Thank you.
Yeah, are there any other questions? Great, I have a question. So in chapter 1, section 3, item 4, it says individual justices may introduce cases to the court to determine whether the court will hear the case. I'm interested to hear why the decision was made to have that in here, as there are no other courts in the US that allow justices to bring forward their own cases.
Honestly, when we were writing the legislation, we looked at that part that was already included into the previous quote unquote bylaws. There wasn't any one of us that really had an issue with this. I personally don't have an issue with the courts having the authority to bring something, or with the justices having the authority to bring something to the court. So, and especially because I know it's hard, especially for our court, to get a lot of cases that are like super substantial. And so I feel like this, while is maybe unorthodox, might be a way to help kind of encourage maybe our justices to look at cases. That being said, while this has been in here, I don't know if I've ever heard of a case being submitted by a Supreme Court justice. And since the Chief Justice is shaking her head no, I'm going to assume it hasn't ever happened. So that's another thing that we could gladly take out if a significant portion of the senators are uncomfortable with it. I'm personally fine with leaving it in, just because I think it helps. It might, well, I don't know, actually, since the data doesn't really say so, but I think it could help potentially to get the court more involved. So I'm open to hear anyone and everyone's opinion on that, if that answers your question.
It does, thank you. Are there any other questions at this time? Great, seeing none, we can now move on. This concludes our questioning period. We will move into the debate period on this item next week. I will probably, based on the conversations that we just had, be sending out a new version of this bill for next week. So please make sure that you review the legislation that I do send out next week, as it might be slightly different than what is on the floor right now. So please keep that in mind and do your due diligence looking at the legislation for next week. We can now move on to item C. The clerk will read.
Item C is SB 63-064, extending the working hours of the Director of Media, introduced by Chief of Staff Kathleen Short for herself. The objective is the Director of Media is consistently working past the required 10 hours per week for the position, as outlined in the 63rd Session Rules and Regulations Manual. This bill is to make it so the required hours accurately reflect the hours that are put in by this position, adding an additional 5 paid hours every week. This will allow the Director of Media to produce more content for the association's website and social media, as well as graphics for the student body to understand better the workings of the association. This is referred to Committee of the Whole from Budget and Finance. This is a first read, so no vote is required.
I believe that Vice President Haas will be giving the authorship speech for Chief of Staff Short.
Yeah, hello everyone. So Masera Al-Sharia, our Director of Media, has been consistently going above and beyond both our expectations and her intended hours working. Currently she's allotted 10 hours a week, but tends to work much more than that, despite her pay being capped at 10 hours. And so Masera has been making all of the graphics for the association. She often has to give that responsibility to either myself or our advisor Fonseca or our Director of Public Relations Garcia. But she's also been creating the Senate agenda videos every week and doing the captions for those. So she works to ensure transparency between our social media and students and the association in general. And personally, I think she's been doing a fantastic job. And we just want to allow her to work to her full potential to ensure that students know that we as an association are there for them and that they can have as much information about what we're doing as possible. And so in that case, anyways, she must be compensated for the hours that she does work. And because of that, I highly encourage an affirmative vote on this bill.
Senator Mounts, do you have a question?
Yes, I do. So when it comes to specifically changing pay, I know that we can't technically do that in this session. It wouldn't apply until next session. So are we like 100% sure this bill, when we pass it, we can make the immediate changes? Because I know that it's something that, like when we talked about last year with making new positions and changing hours and all that and pay rates and things like that, like we had to actually wait until the next session. So is that something that is feasible that we are allowed to do?
Yes, so we can change hours, but we are not allowed to change pay and through the bylaws until the end of the fiscal year. So we can up the amount of hours that she is allowed, or I guess decrease the amount of hours if that's the legislation. But in this case, yes, we are allowed to give her more hours. We just are not allowed to increase her pay rate or anyone's pay rate until the end of the fiscal year.
Senator Liu, your question?
So if this was to be enacted, is currently as the budget stands, is there room in the budget for the additional pay increase?
Yes.
Okay.
Senator Zacharias?
So 2 things were said and they kind of contradict each other. So currently she's working over the hours that she is allowed, and we need to compensate her for that. But also she is not currently able to do her duties and it's being passed on to other members of the executive branch. So are we increasing her pay to compensate her for what she's already doing, or are we increasing her pay to improve the quality and amount of media and work that she's putting out?
I don't believe that those are mutually exclusive. I think her work and the quality of what she's doing is already there. We all see that on social media. And I think the quantity of graphics and videos that we have been putting out is more than we put out last session, more than the session before that. I believe that our transparency this session has been in large part to our Director of Media this year, and I just would like to fairly compensate her for that work that she's already been doing, and continue to ensure that she is, continuing and able to continue that great work that she's already been doing, but also that she has enough time to do the graphics that have been, that she has needed to hand off in order to prioritize other things at this moment.
Are there any other questions for Vice President Haas? Senator Sahel?
So my question will be, it's not allocated hours, right? And we are increasing the allocated hours. But who are actually the ones who are allocating the hours? Don't they, in the beginning, thought about the work that's supposed to be done in 10 hours are not getting done in 10 hours? So why did they put 10 hours as a limit rather than more in the beginning?
Yeah, so the original legislation was actually written for 15 hours. I split last semester, or well, at the beginning of my term as vice president, I intended on both the director of media and the director of public relations to each have 15 hours because I personally was the director of public relations last semester. We split those two positions. We split that one position into two positions that would each have 15 hours to get their work done efficiently and proactively. It was brought to the Senate floor to approve those hours. And the question was whether or not I believed that they could complete the job within 10 hours. And in that situation, I had no idea because we had never had a director of media thus far. And so I made the concession that yes, maybe she could work within 10 hours. She has proven that it's not enough time per week for her to complete her job as thoroughly as I guess we would all like, and she needs those extra hours to ensure that the quality of work is continuing to be done. So long story short, Senate has to approve the amount of hours that Senate has to approve the position, which is that the hours, which includes the hours. So the hour limit means that others have to cover the load now. And that's why I'm coming to you all and saying, I would really, well, I guess I'm not the one benefiting from this, but it would be very beneficial to the association if our director of media could have the 5 extra hours. You all just have to approve that because it has to do with the budget in order to cover those hours. And yes, as I answered to Senator Liu, the budget is there.
Senator Kress?
Is 5 hours going to be adequate to, I guess, make a significant improvement to the director of media's workload?
Yeah, so when you add it up, that's about 10 hours every pay period. And so I guess 5 hours a week, let's just break it down, is enough time for her to complete 2-3 graphics. It's enough time for her to edit 2 of the Senate agenda reading videos and caption the whole thing. So that's plenty of time for her to get multiple projects done within that allotted time. But additionally, she will continue to have her 10 hours a week. It's the hours that she's also currently doing like more now that we can't pay for. And so that's the issue, is that she's currently working about 15 hours a week anyways. It's just that we cannot pay her for that because it's not approved by the Senate under her position for us to do so.
Senator Zacharias, do you have a question?
Yes. So when Masara came to speak to Budget and Finance, she said that she was working about 20 hours a week and still not being able to do some of her duties. So how is increasing it only 5 hours more going to compensate her fairly and also make sure she can do the other stuff that she hasn't been able to get to at 20 hours a week?
Yeah, so that's a fair question. If we could give everybody 20 hours a week, that would be great. But I mean, we're all working over the time that we are allotted within our pay period, and that's what it is, and that's unfortunate. But at the same time, I mean, if you guys want to give her 20 hours a week, that's great, and I would accept that as a friendly amendment. At the same time, she's only currently working 10 hours. Let's take one step at a time. And if 15 hours isn't enough, then it's not enough and we can reevaluate later on down the line. But at this moment, she's working 10 hours and can't get all of her things done in that 10-hour time frame. If in 15 hours she is able to, that's great. If not, then maybe it's a workload thing. Maybe we need to have different conversations, but we've had those conversations and we've evaluated what she would like to be doing, what projects she wants to have, and what she like endeavors she wants to take on. And we have all come to the decision as cabinet and in conversations with Ms. Sarah that 15 hours would be enough for this legislation to go through. You guys.
Senator Majors.
So last year, I'm aware that you, along with some other people, put forward some legislation in regards to splitting the position. And we talked about specifically why we were doing that, because it was too tasking and because the position was virtually two different jobs. My only concern is, at what point will this stop? Because obviously it's too stressful for one person, and now it's too much for two people split for like with 10 hours. So my only concern is how far forward do we go? And you even suggested that maybe in the future we would look to do something more. So my question is, at which point do we look to be more frugal and maybe accept the work of what they can do in 10 hours rather than spending more money as the association?
That's a very valid point. If I'm being frank with you guys, there is a delineation between the things that have to get done and the things that we are prioritizing and our goals as an association in this session. So our goals within this session are our priorities that we have set forth as a cabinet, and those are set on the back burner a lot of times in order to do the things that we have to get done. I'm not going to lie to you. These are all tasking positions in like cabinet positions, and Senate leadership positions are very difficult to do. This is not, yes, you're right. We have come to the floor and said that these are stressful positions before, but I believe that each step we're taking is doing better for the next student who's going to be in this position. And I made that split on purpose so that we could do more efficient things. And I believe that these positions have been doing more efficient work. It's just a matter of allowing them the time and the compensation necessary in order to do that. And so at this point, yes, there might be more steps, but this is not just a temporary fix. This is not anything. I personally don't believe that we will have to come back. I don't know. Maybe there is a different answer, but these are, I guess, bigger conversations that need to be had within each employee within the association, and just understanding where our boundaries lie and what that is. As Treasurer James reported last week, we will be reviewing everyone's workload, both cabinet and Senate leadership. So just to determine where we need to be making adjustments and what that looks like. And cabinet has been having these conversations about workload and what that entails for us as the executive body. But for now, this is kind of what we need from you guys in order to be as efficient as we can and compensate our cabinet as fairly as possible, if I'm being honest.
I think the one thing that I want to add to that is, a year ago when we made the decision to split the two branches and clearly make the split in the two branches, I knew this was going to be a conversation we were going to have, right? As we think about creating the independence of our legislative branch and reworking the responsibilities of our executive branch, right? We knew this was going to have to be an ultimate conversation we needed to talk about, right? Thinking about in the last cycle when we made this decision, Senate chairs were given additional hours before what it was when, I'm just going to pick on Senator Zacharias. When Senator Zacharias was the chair of Safety and Student Services, her hours looked very different now than Chairman Day's hours look like because of that adjustment. And so, Treasurer James and I have been having some conversations about the best way to review those things and review whether or not is the decision we made a year ago with setting the hour limits to folks the best decision we made. Financially, we created a wiggle room in our salaries budget to begin with, because things will always change from time to time. And so I'm confident that as we begin those conversations, and Treasurer James and I are going to put together a timeline that we're going to begin to have individual conversations with those who receive a stipend from the association, and potentially other areas that might need a stipend as well. And so being able to really look at and actually taking the time to actually look at the best course of action that we go from there. So, just like Vice President Haas mentioned, who knows, right? Who knows what in a couple of months things might look different and a proposal that is brought forward may be different. My ultimate hope is, and sounds terrible, but we can't give everybody 40 hours, right? We just can't afford that, and nor should we. And so, once we get numbers that work, and then we've got to have the follow-up conversation of, we've got to stick to the limit you get every pay period, every week, and make some adjustments, and leadership needs to make that adjustment, or senior leadership needs to make that adjustment for those that they're responsible for as well. So, yes.
I also just want to add really quickly, sorry, Olivia, that we are in a growth period, and like Advisor Fonseca said, it is very it's new that we have these new roles, and so it's going to take a little bit of figuring out before we actually get it right. And sorry that this legislation has been on the table for so long, repeatedly, but I think it's important that we're making these changes, and it just shows the growth of the association and that we're progressing in the right direction. I think it's a good sign.
Senator Mounts.
So I'm just curious, is there from what it sounds like, there seems to be a very substantial issue with compensation for all members of both the Senate leadership and within the executive branch as well. Has this been a common thing for the cabinet to talk about and discuss? And then also on that, sorry, I don't want to sound rude, but why is this the first time we're hearing it if it's been a consistent issue? I don't mean that to be rude at all. I'm just honestly genuinely curious.
Yeah, it's not rude, because what's our business is your business as well as senators. But yeah, so cabinet has started having these conversations about 2 weeks ago, but it only came to be a serious conversation last week in cabinet meeting on Friday. And at that point, we were pretty much going to stick with, well, if Macera's bill gets passed, we will then reevaluate collectively through Treasurer James and Advisor Fonseca what we need to be doing in order to compensate positions fairly throughout the association, not just within cabinet, but also within Senate leadership as well. And we have brought Speaker Babin into those conversations. Well, I assume Speaker Babin has been brought into those conversations. It's not really my conversation, but long story short, yes, we have been having the conversations, but it hasn't gone anywhere into real direct action. It's more so, what are our options here? What should we be doing? How do we cut back on people's workloads if that's what it comes to? And how do we make sure we're taking care of ourselves as students, but also as employees and student leaders, and just ensuring that we're not overstressing ourselves, but also being paid and compensated fairly for what we are doing.
Senator Minor.
So I was wondering if you could just kind of clarify some wording in the bill. It says here that the additional 5 hours will allow the director of media to produce more content, but so far we've only talked about their ability to just be paid for what they are doing. So is there concern that without the additional hours, we're going to lose some of the content that they're currently creating?
There will be no loss of current content. I can promise you that. I did not write this bill. I'm not really entirely sure what the more hours entails, but it would be a friendly amendment if we wanted to strike that more content portion. Because really what we're looking for is just the correct amount of hours in order for her to continue producing what she is producing currently. And if that allows for more projects to be on her plate, if that allows for more content to be produced, that's awesome. That's a bonus, but I don't want to promise that to you guys and then not be able to live up to that, because she's at her max workload already.
Senator Zacharias.
So when this went to Budget and Finance, it was indicated that Masara's current standing committees that she has to go to every week comes up to 6 hours a week. Have there been any talks about possibly making it so she goes to less meetings so she can work on more content rather than adding hours for her to work on content?
Yeah, so the meetings she goes to are cabinet meetings, and her two-on-two, President Khan and I both meet with the Director of Media and the Director of Public Relations, and we do those in two-on-two settings so that we cut down on the amount of hours that both the Director of Media and the Director of Public Relations are sitting in meetings. And then cabinet meetings, she has to be there in order to give reports so that I can give you all an association report at the end of the week and ensure that you are being up to date. And then the additional hour she is with Advisor Fonseca and setting goals and ensuring that we are keeping him in the loop of what goals we have as cabinet, and specifically the communications team is working on as well. So those are her standing meetings. President Khan and I do our best to ensure that we are cutting down on the amount of time that all of our officers are sitting in meetings, because it is important to us. And that was the first route of action, was to make sure that, we're doing those two-on-two meetings. We're making sure that she's not sitting on any university or association committees and not being given any additional outside of her realm of purview responsibilities, so that she, doesn't have anything additional that's not necessary.
Senator Majors, I believe you're next.
Is it too late now to have a senator, or not senator rather, but just Masara come speak to us on behalf of herself? Because, for example, I know nothing about graphic design. So, I mean, it could take 10 hours to do one design or whatever, or just to hear more about her personal experience, I think would be of benefit to the Senate. So I was just wondering if that would be a possibility.
Yeah, so that's a question I can answer. She can come to the next meeting if there is enough interest from the Senate to hear directly from the Director of Media, Masara. So if there is interest in that, I can invite her and we can do a short questioning period at the next meeting if there's interest in that. Senator Mounts, go ahead.
So I kind of have two questions. First is just a clarification. Was this referred to any Senate committee? Because it does not look like it was in the bill.
Yeah, it was. It went through Budget and Finance first.
Yeah. Okay. That is all I have then. Thank you.
Great. Are there any other questions for Vice President Haas regarding this bill, Advisor Fonseca?
Masara texted me that she can jump on right now if that is a preference and the desire of the Speaker and the Senate.
I mean, if she can do so in the next 2 minutes, then yes, but if it is going to take longer than that, then no.
Okay, let me find out.
Senator Sahel.
So the other question will be, so if we increase the hours to 15 hours, for example, and she also have like a supervisor who she answers to, and they increase the amount of work that she was doing, because now we increase the hours to 15. Is that a possibility, President Haas, Vice President Haas?
No. So, I guess in a short answer, not really, because President Khan and I are sort of her administrators in this sense, I guess. I don't really know what to call it. We're kind of like her bosses, but it's more self-driven than that. It's like she puts forward, you know, the amount and projects that she wants to see, and we trust that because her work is really great. And so we don't necessarily put a ton of projects on her plate, but what we do ask of her, she completes. That wasn't a great explanation of this. Gabe, if you have a better explanation of how SGA works and how like we do things, that would be great. But the short answer is that no, if the hours are increased, nobody will be adding more to her plate in order to fill those hours.
Yeah, so exactly what Vice President Haas said. Like every member of cabinet reports to both of them, and those two, President Khan and Vice President Haas, dictate the workload and the work responsibilities that are given to them. Secondary to that, I stress oftentimes to Vice President Haas and President Khan to balance the work responsibilities, and I do my best, and I do this with every position that I advise, of protecting their balance as best as possible and pushing things to other positions if we have to. So we do our best to try and do that. I've already stressed to President Khan that I would advise we don't add any more responsibilities so that we can take the responsibilities that have been passed to other folks and put it back onto Director Alsheria so that she can then do the work that the 15 hours would give her. And so I stress that wholeheartedly all the time with all of that.
Senator Majors?
My question's for Masara, if she can answer. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Okay, so my question for Masara is, could you take us through a day in the life of the Director of Media? Tell us basically what your day consists of, how long it takes for you to, create each graphic design, how long it takes you to caption and create the videos that preface the Senate meetings. I'm not sure what they're exactly called. Yeah, just explain to us what you do and why it takes you past the 10 hours that are already allocated.
Hey everyone, so again, my name is Sarah Alsheria. I'm the Director of Media. So basically, like Mackenzie said previously, and also I'd said in the Budget and Finance Committee meeting, that my meetings go up to like 6 to 10 hours, depending on exactly what's going on. So the reason why I say up to 10 hours is because, for example, right now, I'm currently working on Latinx Heritage Month videos. So that involves having 3 more videos, and videos kind of take a really long time to make, just in terms of like getting all the footage. So that means doing the interviews, getting every resource that I need to do the video. And then I go in and I edit that. And then that maybe takes 30 minutes to an hour, depending on what I'm doing. And then captioning itself takes maybe about an hour. But for the Senate agenda reading videos, I do every week. So it depends on exactly what's going on with the agenda and the clarity of the interview that I get and how much editing I need to do based off of that. Sometimes it can take an hour, sometimes it can take 2 hours. As for graphics, I get a lot of like graphics requests just from people within the association as well as Senate. And plus there's sometimes a lot of short notice things that takes higher priority. I'm like, hey, like I need this graphic, it needs to be out by tomorrow. So obviously I have to take time out of my day to work on that as well. So graphics, depending on exactly what's going on, can maybe take an hour or two, depending on how the quality of the graphic, I'm gonna say. So honestly, basic things, maybe like an hour or two, but what really matters and something that I really care about is the presentation of Student Government Association. One of the things that we, as an association, we need to make sure we present ourselves in a nice professional manner. A lot of people react better to videos rather than graphics. If they're scrolling on the social media like feed, they can just see graphics to go past. So that's part of the reason why I'm wanting to do a lot more videos within this session, and hopefully future positions can do more in the future. But I hope that answers some of your questions about what my day looks like.
Senator Ireg?
just curious. So obviously this position was created from one that was kind of split in two at the end of last session, beginning of this one. So Masala, do you feel like everything that came to you in that split belongs to you? Do you feel like the work that you're doing is appropriate for your job and really valuable?
Yes, I do.
Okay.
So whenever we talk about the director of public relations and director of media, those are two very separate things within the communication fields. So what I do focuses on the graphics, focuses on the videos, while David handles like different things. He handles David Garcia. He handles more of like town halls, like press releases. That's not what I do. What I do is basically what you guys see. So I am the visual person when it comes to the association, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that does. Thank you so much.
Senator Sahel.
Yes. So my question will be, before now we are saying that there's a lot of work and stuff, but just skip back to 2 years before, or a year before, 2 years before, even before the split, we still had the same job title and a person was working on that job title. Why would they never asked for an extra hours or an extra pay or compensation when we are facing it right now? I
Yeah.
don't see any changes. And then the second thing is, not to be rude, but if a person is not working fast enough, they kick out the person. That's what I have been in this country for 4 years. If I don't work at a job, they just kick me out, literally. So my question is, what is changed within 2 years that we have to do this? We have to do this discussion.
Okay, so the position was split last year, or yes, it was the last meeting of last session. So, well, I guess the first meeting of this session. So sorry to confuse, but okay, so the job was split, but I actually held the position last session. So I worked within my 20-hour week, but still I was going over my hours. I just did it and bit my tongue and didn't say anything. And also there was not as many outside goals that I was working on last session, because of the there weren't as many goals and expectations put on me by the president and vice president of last session. So I was able to do pretty much whatever I wanted to with the position within the hours. So because we are kind of driving the association in a forward motion, in a forward movement, by setting goals and ensuring transparency to the student body, that is why President Khan and I have put the expectation on our cabinet and all of everyone that works within the association pretty much to have their own goals and to have, expectations for themselves that they want to see throughout this session. And I think that's a good thing, but also we need the time and the energy and the compensation in order to go ahead and do that and get the work that we've been doing so far done. No shade to any other sessions, but we've been doing really good work, and that work can't be done unless we have outside goals and we have the things that we're doing and we have the fair compensation for it. And we're not going to have as much drive and dedication to the association if we're not being paid, if we're not being compensated fairly, if we're not being given, the additional hours that we're requesting, or I don't know, just, I guess, working within our positions as fairly and efficiently as we can.
Senator Majors.
Yeah, so I have a clarification question for Massaro and then a subsequent question for Vice President Haas, if the speaker will allow it. But first, okay. So first I would like to address Massaro and ask, there were some clarification issues regarding the legislation that maybe we could clarify better with you. Would you be doing more work with the 15 hours allocated, or would extending the hours just better represent the work that you already do?
So to me, it's a little bit of both. So with the work that I already do, it would give me more time to make the quality of my work better. like just to improve like the Senate and reading agenda, to improve the graphics, to improve the videos I'm currently already working on. And plus the hours that would be extended would allow me to do more for the goals of this association and my own personal goals. So just it's basically both.
Are
And
there
then-
any? Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, sorry. And then for Vice President Haas, just to further on my previous question with a more practical example, I've seen Ms. Sara's work. I think that it's extremely well done. And so I think it's very possible in the future that we might have a director of media that doesn't necessarily have the skill that Ms. Sara does. So I'm just fearful of the precedent that we set if we have a less skilled director of media that, you know, can't fulfill the obligations in the allotted time, that we are going to have to move expand the hours again and again. So my question is, what do you see as the cap of the hours worked for this director of media? At what point do we stop extending the hours and just say that's what they're going to do for the organization?
I would love to be able to give you an answer to that. I don't believe that I am fit to do so. I think each and every cabinet is different. And like I said before, it is really a precedent set by the president and the vice president of that session of how much effort and energy and dedication that we all are going to have to the association and to our work. And you're right, Miss Sarah's skills are amazing, top tier. And that's why we picked her for this position. That's why we picked her for this job. That's why we created the position. And I genuinely believe that that is not going to be the case every time. You're right. But I don't know what to do if, like what you said, the director of media cannot make that time crunch work. That's not really, I don't know, that's not within my control, but it's also going to be different for each cabinet. It's going to be different for each session. And so, I mean, I want to see our session produce the highest quality of work that we can. And if it comes to the point where the Senate has to relook at it, that's the situation that it is. But I think the person who remains the most constant is Advisor Fonseca. And so I think if anything, he should be answering this question. But just keep in mind that cabinets are going to be different. And like even the next vice president might not put in as many hours as I'm going to put in, or they might put in more hours than me. It's a little different for each session.
Advisor Fonseca, go ahead.
Yeah, you know, there is no way to ever predict it, right? Like every new president I get to work with, it's new set of expectations that they set for themselves and that they set for the work that they want to do. I would, you know, I have, again, strongly always advised, even when Ridja was elected and when she was starting to think about cabinet, alongside with Mackenzie, of you've got to find the people for the job that we are looking for. So it would be my sincerest hope that we wouldn't find someone to be a director of media who can't do those things, or who isn't skilled to do those things, because, and this is going to sound extremely terrible, and I apologize. Please don't be mad at me about this. If you don't have the skill set to do it, why are we going to pick you to do the job? Because then I have to spend time teaching you to do the job that I already need you to do on day one. And so that is always going to be the advice / expectation I put on the president and the vice president of, you need someone to do the job on day one, not on day 100. Because in that day, we've already wasted time that we could have picked better to do. That's the same advice that I gave to Speaker Babin when she was selecting her the chairs. You need to find someone who can do it on day one, not wait until day 100 to figure out the job. And so that would be my sincerest hope. And yeah.
I also would just like to point out that we're not going to continue to get great candidates like Miss Sarah if we're not compensating them fairly. That's just what it is.
Senator Kress will be our last question for this bill. Senator Kress, go ahead.
Ms. Sara, in your opinion, is increasing, I guess, the working hours per week to 15, is that going to be a satisfactory baseline for the position as you see it with your expertise and knowledge of the position?
I will say I think with every position, like what has been said before in the meeting, that with more hours, you are going to be able to do more. But when it does come to the director in media, I don't think a lot of people realize how much work goes into graphics and videos. Fine arts takes a lot more than just hopping onto something, typing something, and then exporting it. It's really a lot more work than just that. So raising the hours will allow me to do more, to create more, to be better at what I'm making, and to allow this association to have a better presence on social media, to have a better presence on the Wichita State campus and basically United States. So it's basically this is for the association as a whole.
Okay, and is 15 hours, well, I guess I'm questioning the decision why it's 15 instead of 20. Why are we increasing it just by 5 instead of 20? So I'm just trying to establish the baseline. In your opinion, with regard to your position, what do you think's more appropriate for the number of hours per week?
Like Mackenzie said, so it's like kind of like one step at a time, but I will say 20 hours is probably would be appropriate for somebody within my position, maybe as well as others, but like again, the more time you give to like positions like within like the communications team, communication is a lot of work. And if you also have to put in the time just for meetings as well, because it's not like I'm allocating that entire 10 hours just for graphics and videos. I'm also spending my time within, like cabinet meetings, within like 2-on-2, within 1-on-1, within like meetings with the senators about different projects that we're working on. Does that answer your question?
I think so, yeah.
Thank you. That will conclude our questioning period for this bill. We will move into the debate and voting period next week. We can now move on to or item D. The clerk will read. Go ahead.
Item D is SB 63-062, approving the Uniting Bold Sisters Student Organization. Introduced by Talon Fox, President of the Uniting Bold Sisters for herself, and Advisor Gabriel Fonseca for himself. The objective is to grant the recognition of the Uniting Bold Sisters Student Organization. This is referred to Committee on Ways and Means. This is a first read, so no vote is required.
Advisor Fonseca, would you like to give an authorship speech?
Yes, I am happy to yield my time to a representative from the organization, and I think I just let her in. Jaden?
Yes, I'm here.
Wonderful. Go ahead, Jaden.
Okay, hi everyone. My name is Jaden Studi and I'm representing Uniting Bold Sisters. Uniting Bold Sisters is an organization that was founded on the guiding principles of multiculturalism, education, leadership, and sisterhood, just to name a few. Our mission statement is to welcome, unite, and empower sisters through leadership, education, and celebration of multicultural identities. We're applying for registered student organization status because we want to foster relationships between multicultural students and build meaningful relationships within the campus community. It's important to us that we're proactively seeking to make spaces more inclusive for multicultural students. Uniting Bold Sisters defines multiculturalism as including but not limited to race, identifying with the LGBTQ+ community, ability, religion, economic background, and ideology. What sets us apart from pre-existing registered student organizations is that we're founded on the basis of multiculturalism and have different focuses than others. Our main focuses are to create and build lasting friendships with multicultural students on campus while growing and nurturing leadership and community-geared skills. And that is all I have. I will open up the floor for questions.
Are there any questions for Jaden Studi? Senator Liu, go ahead.
So what are some of the activities that you'll be conducting, let's say, throughout the school year for this organization?
Yeah, so we are currently in the process of narrowing down what we want our philanthropic focus to be. So whatever we decide that to be, we will be focusing on community service activities within that. And then for campus-wide activities, right now we are planning on doing a virtual event in the next 2 weeks, and we're having an open dialogue about what it means to have a diverse network and why it's important. So just kind of events like that.
Are there any other questions for Jaden Studi? Great, seeing none, that concludes our questioning period. Thank you very much, Jaden, for your time. We will move into debate and voting on this bill at the next meeting. We can now move on to item E. The clerk will read.
Item E is FB 63-009, Marian Abdurrad Individual Conference Funding, introduced by Senator Maggie Hull. The objective is to authorize the allocation of $100 to Marian Abdurrad, referred to Committee of the Whole from Budget and Finance. This is a first read, so no vote is required.
Senator Hull, do you have an authorship speech?
Yeah, so when we met with Miriam, she was really passionate about what she was doing when it came to engineering. And I'm going to be 110% honest, I don't really understand that much when it comes to engineering, but she was very passionate about what she was doing and going to be able to present this paper, which will help fellow engineering students and her be able to achieve her goals in the future.
Are there any questions for Senator Hull about this bill? Senator Liu.
Do you know the total cost of the Informs virtual 2020 annual meeting?
Yes, I think hers was around $150. So she will have to still handle the other $50 on her own.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions for our Senator Kirk? Go ahead.
This is also just more of a clarification for Senator Liu. She's going out to her college itself to be able to take care of, and her own self to be able to take care of the additional 50 and all other costs. So she's not just sitting around waiting for us to say yes.
Are there any other questions for Senator Hull? Great, seeing none, that concludes our questioning period. We will move into debate and vote on this item at the next meeting. We can now move on to item F. The clerk will read.
Item F is FB 63-010, Saima Esfandiarpour Individual Conference Funding, introduced by Senator Maggie Hull for herself. The objective is to authorize the allocation of $100 to Saima Esfandiarpour, referred to Committee of the Whole from Budget and Finance. This is the first read, so no vote is required.
Senator Hull, go ahead and give your authorship speech.
Yeah, so we've all seen a bill from SEMA before in order to do conference funding as well. So this is her second ask, but this is for a separate conference. And so this one will be about supply chain management and the ways that IBS computers can help in that process. That's the most I have. If you have any other questions, I can direct you to her on that, of her research topic. But she will also be able to go to workshops and tutorials as well, and then be able to meet with potential jobs and all that kind of stuff. So I am open to any questions.
Are there any questions for Senator Hull? Seeing none, that concludes the questioning period on this item. And we will move into debate and voting at the next meeting. We can now move on to item H. The clerk will read.
Item H is AR 63-010, resolution to create a task force on the Supreme Court, introduced by Speaker Olivia Babin for herself. The objective is, as concerns have existed about the Supreme Court for many years now, and no full overhaul of their rules and regulations has happened in recent memory, the Senate should create a temporary task force to review all their policies, procedures, makeup, duties, responsibilities, and budgetary needs to ensure the best solutions are found. This is referred to Committee of the Whole from Rules and Administration. This is the vote required a simple majority.
So I am the author of this bill. As we saw kind of during our questioning period for the SCRAM Act, there's a lot of different things that go into the Supreme Court, coming from the Constitution, the bylaws, and well, there's actually two sections of the bylaws that mention the Supreme Court. So there's a lot to cover and a lot more questions that need to be asked, that it's hard to have just one small group of senators doing it, or even just having Ways and Means do it, because Ways and Means has a lot other issues that they need to cover than to just focus on the one issue of the Supreme Court. And there's a lot of questions that I think that we need to answer. I can go through and give you exactly what those are if you're interested. But I think that this issue needs more than we've had the ability to give it. So I want to create a task force that has a specific timeline to work through these issues so that we can finally have the correct response to the concerns that people have had about the Supreme Court for years now. So I am open to any questions. Senator Sahel.
So will the task force will be includes of the new members you will be electing or selecting, or it will be within the Senates that you will be choosing different people?
Yeah, so the makeup of this committee is made up of the speaker as the chair, the advisor, the chair of the Ways and Means Committee, 2 senators chosen by me, and 2 senators chosen by the chair of the Ways and Means Committee. So it's a committee made up of senators, but just it's whoever myself and Chairperson Majors would pick. Senator Mounts.
So seeing that the 60th, 61st, and 62nd session worked on this, how are you going to ensure that this process is actually something that's like actually done this year and not just swept under the rug like it has been the last 3?
Yeah, so I mean, I'm going to be the chairperson. I'm starting this committee. I plan, it has within the legislation, it provides that we have to give updates each month to the entire Senate and that we have to put forward a recommendation of legislation to the Rules and Admin Committee by I think it's like the 2nd week in February or something like that. So this has built-in measures to ensure that this actually happens, as opposed to, I mean, I remember in the 61st session when they made a committee that never met and never did anything. So this will not be that. And I built in those measures already. Senator Mounts, go ahead.
So seeing that this is a resolution, how does this hold weight in holding us accountable? Like, I guess I would say not constitutionally, but in the rules themselves.
I mean, it's the exact same way that we create any other task force. So when we created the task force on student fees, it was a resolution the same way as this. There's no way, I don't think that we need to create a permanent committee to do this. I think that would be very strange for us to do. And so the way for us to create a temporary committee is to do so through a resolution. And this is asking us to do it, and we are binded by our own resolutions. So it is binding action when it addresses the associate, like our work, if that makes sense. Senator Zacharias.
So how will the senators serving in this be chosen? Would it just be you offering the position to certain senators, or senators can reach out to you?
Yeah, so I'm planning on having people reach out to me. So if this passes, if you're interested in doing this, I think that this is something that anyone should have the opportunity to do. I don't want to handpick senators because I don't know who's interested in doing this work. I don't want it to just be, you know, a remake up of Ways and Means. I want new voices and new people to be a part of this process. So anyone who's interested, I want them to reach out to me, and then I will select 2 from people who reach out to me. I don't know how Senator Majors would do it. That's on him. So are there any other questions? Senator Zacharias.
So basically my last question directed at Senator Majors.
Go ahead, Senator Majors.
So the way that I was going to go about it was I was going to select members of my committee. However, if you would like to be a part of the committee, absolutely reach out to me, and we can make something happen possibly.
Are there any other questions for me about this resolution? Great, we can move into the voting period on this resolution. Is there anyone who would like to speak in affirmation of this resolution? Senator Day.
This is a point of order. I thought we just exited the questioning period. There still needs to be a debate period. Oh wait, I'm confused. Oh my God, never mind.
We are in the debate period, yes. So is there anyone who would like to speak in affirmation of this bill? I'm sorry if that was unclear. Senator Zacharias.
So I'm not actually sure if this is affirmation. It's more of an amendment. So I move to amend line, sorry, I'm line 20 of this resolution to change it from the second Friday in February to the second Friday in December.
In December, is that what you said? Sorry, it's kind of quiet.
Yes.
Okay, that's friendly. We can do that. So we will have legislation to the Rules and Administration Committee before the end of this semester. With that change, that's friendly, so we don't need to debate it or anything. Do we have a speech in affirmation? Senator Hull.
Yeah, so when Speaker Babin brought this to Rules and Admin, I thought it was a great idea. Just because we need ways and means to focus on other things that they have on their plates as well. And I think creating a specific committee in order to focus on such a big part of our association, I think it's super important, and I will be voting in affirmation of this bill.
Thank you. Do we have a speech in negation? Seeing none, do we have another speech in affirmation? Senator Mounts.
So when the idea was originally presented to me, I was not super hot on having a whole nother committee because I feel like it is a bit of a waste of resources. That being said, as I think probably one of these sole people who has served in Senate and has dealt with the Supreme Court the last 3 sessions, and seeing it go pretty much nowhere, especially with me being the only person who was actually dedicated to working on the project and everyone else dipping out, I feel like this is probably going to be the best course of action, as crappy as it sounds, to have to create a whole nother committee on top of another committee already having this job. But I feel like this is probably, while not the best solution, is probably the only solution that will work. And so that's why I will be voting in favor.
Thank you. Are there any speeches in negation? Do we have any other speeches in affirmation? Senator Majors.
Well, I am in favor of this legislation, but also with a motion to pass with unanimous consent of the Senate.
With a motion to pass by unanimous consent of the Senate, do we have any objections to this motion? If so, please raise your hand. Senator Zacharias with an objection. Are there any speeches in negation of this bill? Any speeches in affirmation? Great, seeing none, we will now move into the voting period on this bill. If you will go ahead and get out your iClicker apps, you should be able to vote there. Remember that A is yes, B is no, and C is abstain. You should only be abstaining if you have a conflict of interest on this specific item. I am still waiting for a few people to vote, so please go and get your votes in, please. I will give it 15 more seconds. And with that, our voting period has closed with 40, hold on. Sorry, I forgot to actually look at the results. I should have done that. With 44 in favor, 1 against, and 2 abstentions, this resolution passes. So I will work on making that committee here as soon as I can. I would like to entertain a motion to extend the meeting to 10 o'clock, as we have some very important reports that need to be given within the month of September. So we do need to extend the meeting. I would like to entertain a motion to extend to 10 o'clock. Senator Hull.
Yeah, I motion to extend the meeting to 10 o'clock.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Senator Day with the second. Go ahead and click yes or no on your Zoom screen. Still waiting on people to vote. If you're unsure of where you can find it, you just click participants and then you'll click either the green yes or the red no. I will give it about 2 more minutes. Not 2 minutes. I'm sorry. I'm at 30 seconds. That was crazy of me. All right, with 30 in favor, 30 in favor, 15 against, and 2 abstentions, this passes, and the meeting is now extended to 10 o'clock. There are no items referred to committee at this time. We finally got all those bad boys out on the floor. We can now move into officer reports. My report will be on the record. If you're interested in knowing what I did this week, it's there. I had to give a lot of interviews and things like that when it came to the presidency, and I have been hoping to have conversations with both the director of media and the director of public relations to talk about more of their role, seeing what we can do, you know, what that all is going to look like in future sessions. So that is the condensed version of my report. Senator Flores is not here today, so we can move on to item C. Senator Liu, your report.
So over the last week, I continued to do some research into income share agreements for the idea I've been having. I also had Kmont Morgan come to my committee last week to speak about service learning and hopefully continue discussions on the creation of a service learning based certificate for the university. I also sat on the Faculty Senate Committee, and in that committee, most of the items on the agenda were not addressed due to the issues with the presidency, and the majority of the meeting was directed to questions about the presidency. There was concerns on many faculty members brought concerns on the composition of a new search committee for our next for the next president, whether it be like open or closed, whether certain members of the Wichita community will be on that committee and their conflicts of interest or their views. They also brought concerns on how the resignation is perceived by the university and by the Wichita community. And lastly, they brought up concerns on the reasons behind the resignations and if it's possible to get answers from KBOR about why the president resigned. That is my report. I'm open to questions.
Are there any questions for Senator Liu about his report? Senator Eyrig.
And what was decided as to the question of whether or not there's a way to get more information about some of those topics, including like the cause of the resignation? What did the committee determine?
So in the Faculty Senate, there was no definite way of doing it. What they're hoping to do is get a regent into the meeting so Faculty Senate members can ask the regent questions about it. However, the president of the Faculty Senate strongly said that that will most likely not happen due to the high possibility of NDAs being part of the presidential resignation. The only potential process that was brought up was submitting a FOIA request for information, for whatever information that may be related to Dr. Golden.
Are there any other questions for Senator Liu about his report? Seeing none, Senator Hull, your report.
Yeah, hi everyone. So I'm going to keep this very short. You can see the full extended version later on, but a lot of my time has been spent on meetings on the new student fee process, meeting with certain folks to get that ready to come to the Senate floor. And then also our committee got an update on hardship funds, and we'll be providing that information to the advocate so they can provide the information to students whenever it is necessary. So I'm open to any questions.
Are there any questions for Senator Hull about her report? Great, seeing none. Senator Day, your report.
All right, so I'm going to keep this brief again, hopefully not humiliate myself again. In terms of what I've done today, this past week, a lot of what I did was prepare for the safety walk, which at this time I believe will be held on Tuesday, October 20th at 7 p.m. The walk is being held in conjunction with UPD and facilities planning, and there will be food. So please turn out to that if you're interested in student safety and advocating, communicating those to those constituencies on campus. Part of my time was also taken up by the Student Publication Board, and especially the Student Fees Task Force. I created some task force within my committee, not like the task force discussed earlier, but like just little groups within my committee to work on specific subjects. I'll just leave it at that. If you have any questions, just ask me.
Are there any questions for Senator Day? Seeing none, Senator Perkins, your report.
Yeah, I will also keep this super brief for everyone's time's sake. I know we have a lot of things to get to. I'll just hit 3 key points. So we've had 3 voter registration drives in the last week. We've had over a dozen voter education presentations and we're constantly scheduling more. We have a lot upcoming. And then we are currently working and reviewing our lobbying process that doesn't really exist for our university. So we're doing some research on what other student governments process is at other universities, and we're doing some research to try to draft some piece of legislation to determine what our university will do as far as like our students' lobbying efforts. But you can read my full report. It's going to be submitted to the record, but those are the key points. Feel free to ask me any questions. Oh, with that, I'm open to questions for more formality.
Are there any questions for Senator Perkins? Great, seeing none, we can now move on to Senator Majors, your report.
Yeah, it's a common theme. Time is of the essence, so I'll keep it quick. First of all, today you saw that we forwarded the Scram Act. Please reach out if there are any amendments that you would like us to make. Most of them will be friendly. We'd love to be tangible. We don't want this to be something that we're saying here, hey, pass this. This is our idea. Senate can't work on it. We're open to any and everybody's concerns and opinions. So yeah, also we're reaching out to RSOs. Today we had the Kuwaiti Student Organization here to speak. They'll be coming to you next week. We forwarded that with unanimous consent with recommendation to pass. Next week, we're gonna have 2 speaking with us, the K-pop organization again, and the Strategic Supply Chain Management Group, which there was a funding bill for that on the floor today, so that's cool. Yeah, so yeah, I think that's basically it.
Are there any questions for Senator Majors? Great, seeing none, we can move into association reports. Vice President Haas, the executive branch report.
Okay, hi everyone again. So for the Director of Media, she's currently working on Latinx Heritage Month videos for the DEI committee. So be on the lookout for those on social media. She is and will be editing the pictures very soon. She hasn't been able to get to those, but she will soon. So thank you all for that. For the Director of Public Relations, our virtual town hall was Thursday, and there was lots of valuable information there. So check it out on YouTube if you don't watch it live. And then also he has been working on celebrating the Latinx Heritage Month and working with our Latino AX members of the association to do that and work on that project. So for my own report, President Khan and I have continued to sit in meetings regarding the Multicultural Center, and then the virtual town hall was great. Check it out. And then I also attended the University Village Town Hall today, and I look forward to working closely with Dr. K. Monk Morgan to encourage the healthy development of our University Village moving forward. If you have any questions about that, I am more than willing to talk. If you are passionate about it, please reach out to me and I'll get you in communications with either her or another person, another contact person on there. Okay, so for President Khan's report, the pub board is still searching for the editor-in-chief of the Sunflower. They'll be making a decision and we'll be sharing the news with everyone soon. Multicultural building efforts continue alongside with different university policy work. And then the student advocate and President Khan attended a meeting with lawyers who are conducting research over the Title IX policy on our campus. The research will be used to help better our Title IX process. Also, she was asked to speak at the town hall, the University Village Town Hall, for different people who may want to partner with our university. If you'd like to hear about that, feel free to reach out to her as well. That is all I have.
Are there any questions for Vice President Haas about anything that she just mentioned? Great, seeing none. Advisor Fonseca, your report.
Nothing super major to report other than hopefully soon the task force on student fees will wrap up its process and be introducing its legislation forward. My biggest advice for all of you, there are some substantial changes. So when the opportunity presents itself, and I imagine that Chairwoman Hull and Treasurer James and other members of the task force will make themselves available to all of you to read it, and also take them up on their offer if they host any open sessions to ask questions, present those things. These are similar practices we've done in the past when we've done some major overhauls to pieces of legislation to offer some of these listening sessions and whatnot. So I'd recommend all of you take them up on that offer when the opportunity presents itself, when the legislation is introduced. So other than that, the shock and support locker wise, things are going really well there. We're working with the UP, USS, and Faculty Senate to host another drive competition in the fall. So things are going extremely well there as well. That is all that I have, and I will answer any questions there are any.
Are there any questions for Advisor Fonseca? Great, seeing none. Chief Justice, your Supreme Court report.
Hi, everyone. So sorry, mine is probably not going to be as brief as everyone else's since I'm not here weekly. And there are quite a few new faces. So I want to take this time to explain how the court has been functioning this session, what we've been working on, and answering any questions that you all may have. So first off, I really want to make it clear, for this court to function, one of the most important steps is meeting quorum. So this means that we have met the required number of justices that we need to render decisions. If you're not familiar, this court has jurisdiction over the Constitution, bylaws, statutes, and legislation that has been passed. Decisions from the court fall under opinions or rulings as of right now. And there has been some confusion as to what this means in previous sessions. So we wanted to kind of clarify. An opinion is an official interpretation or clarification of items that fall under our jurisdiction, whereas a ruling would be more of a remedy to a concern over items that fall under our jurisdiction. So for example, an appeal that would be submitted to us from parking appeals could be considered a ruling. We wanted to make sure that we differentiated between both of them. So we've created two separate request forms, one for an opinion and one for a ruling. And our aim is to make sure that we're provided with the information that's necessary for the court to make an appropriate decision for what whoever is submitting is seeking. The judicial forms can be found on ShockerSync under forms. Any member of the association, including your constituents, can submit a request. These are very new. We just created them. Before, it was one form, one document that was a court hearing form. If you're interested in looking at that document, we have it uploaded on the previous session documents in ShockerSync. But we are extremely open to any suggestions, tips, questions, concerns over those. So I encourage you all to go check them out. The Supreme Court advisor and I have been meeting weekly since the beginning of this session, so since the beginning of my tenure as Chief Justice. The court met a few times over the summer. We've been meeting weekly since school started. Just to clarify, these meetings are not case hearings, they're strictly administrative, so there are no discussions about cases or previous cases or possible cases. It's purely providing an opportunity for the court to understand our role within the association. We've been focusing a lot on judicial training, expectations, familiarizing ourselves with our jurisdiction, and training on court hearing procedures. And we've also taken this time to add structure to our meetings. Like I said, we've appointed a clerk and consistency in the way that we're operating. Our role in SGA, via our decisions, of course, is to provide you all with feedback and perspective. And even though we all have separate roles, we share the same mission of supporting students with equity, with transparency. I encourage all of you to reach out to the court at any time through email, sga.supremecourt, and I will put that in the chat box as well for everyone. And if there are any questions, I'll be more than happy to answer what I can.
Are there any questions for the Chief Justice? Senator Mounts?
So on a weekly basis, how often does the court meet, and what specifically do you all talk about, delving more into the scope of like trainings and things like that?
So right now we're meeting over Zoom, obviously 3:30s Mondays, usually an hour. Right now we're tacking on some extra time at the end because I want to make sure that Justice Leffler is fully comfortable in his role as the clerk, since this is something that we're kind of fleshing out this session. And coming up with different templates. So what we've been doing is we've been looking at a lot of research from peer universities and how their judicial branches work in order to get kind of some inspiration on templates for decisions, since we had nothing of the sort, some kind of structure to our meetings. So for example, you all have Robert's rules. The Supreme Court had nothing like that beforehand. There were no official court hearing procedures other than what was established in the policies and procedures, and just making sure that the justices are aware of, basic judicial terms that will be popping up. We weren't necessarily focused on that in the previous session because the Chief Justice was the one who was writing the majority of the opinions, but I would really love the opportunity for all of my justices to write at least one opinion if they're given the chance. I think that it's extremely important that they're all able to express how they are interpreting the law and Constitution with their own words, and that way it's not just all on the Chief Justice.
Senator Mounts, did you have a follow-up question?
Yes, I do. So what would you do to recommend the Senate to get more involved within the, I guess, Supreme Court process, albeit submitting maybe questions for opinions or things like that? Like what would you recommend for the Senate to do to maybe have you guys do your job a little, all right, but maybe not, that's kind of a rude way to say that, but like have you guys do what you are intended to do at this, in this association?
Are you looking for a specific example or?
Just in general, what would you recommend maybe for senators to submit to the Supreme Court if they had questions?
Honestly, I would recommend that senators speak to their constituents and make sure that they're aware of what is in the journal and what isn't, and familiarizing yourselves exactly with the wording that's in the Constitution. I mean, there is a lot of room for interpretation. Of course, a lot of these are easier and more better exemplified when there is something that is occurring like in that moment, and that way there's something to base it off of. And so, I mean, I'm not necessarily going to get into any examples because I don't feel like that's my place, but anything that is within our jurisdiction, we're willing to take a look at. And if you take a look at the forms that I spoke about previously, the questions that we decided on and what we're asking from people that are submitting these requests will hopefully narrow down and tailor exactly what it is that people are looking to seek from it. And then we'll be able to see if it's something that we can accept and that will follow through. Because there may be something that will be submitted that we feel is either too close to something political that we don't want to necessarily get involved into. We can always decide to not take a case if we feel like it's not within our decision and our jurisdiction to approve so. If you have any questions, you can also always ask me, or you can ask Gabe and Nancy, and I'm sure they would be more than happy to see if it's something that should be brought forth before us.
Yeah, I wanted to kind of just touch a little bit on that because I think that it's important for us to understand that the Supreme Court is kind of like the last thing that you want to go to. So like, with all your other problems, you go to a lot of the other courts first, and then if there's a problem with their decision, it goes to the Supreme Court. The same thing is kind of true if we're having problems interpreting the Constitution. The only time it should really go to the Supreme Court is if there's major disagreement that we can't come to our own solution about. So it's not just like if you willy-nilly decide you have a question about the Constitution, you really should wait until you've had conversations with other people, because it's really like until there is like a problem with what we're interpreting, we don't need to bring things to the Supreme Court just whenever.
The way that, and Nancy Lucy, who some of you all know, is our assistant dean of students, but she also serves as a judicial advisor. And some of the things that her and I have always talked about is, right, the Supreme Court is your in this, right, in reality, is your last resort. They are the highest court on campus, and they should be utilized as such, right? There will inevitably be an opportunity, a moment, a time in which disagreement is going to exist, whether it's internally between you all yourselves as senators or the Senate against the executive branch. That is why we have the Supreme Court to be able to offer the final decision on how they do that. You know, it's very clear, and again, Nancy and I talk about this a lot. They don't set law. They don't write policy. They don't do that. They will advise you on the best possible way. However, they will tell you no. If you do something that violates the Constitution, they will tell you no. Well, let me take that back. If they all agree to it, they'll tell you no, right? Like, I think let's be true to that, right? If the court makes that decision, because that's their job. Their job is not to protect you or the executive, it's to protect the entire association, including every single student that is impacted by the decisions you all make. Additionally, right, if you get geeky and nerdy about student government, right, if you've read the Bill of Rights, their job is also to protect the Bill of Rights against you, right? Like, you yourselves as members who make policies on behalf of students, their job is to protect the students, that sounds weird, against you. And vice versa. And so, right, that's the court's obligation and duty, the oath they take, the responsibility they have, which is why I would encourage, and like the Chief Justice mentioned, I would encourage you, as you talk to your peers, as you talk to your constituents, the people you represent, and you hear the issues, you hear the problems, that's what the court is for. If you are talking to your constituents who, you know, got a traffic ticket, appealed it once, and then the appeal was turned down, tell them to submit it to the Supreme Court, right? And help the aspects of reminding your peers that they have other options as well, other solutions with the Supreme Court. And, you know, at the end of the day also, right, whenever conflict comes up, and it is my hope that there won't be any, but let's be honest, can't get 70 people together and not have conflict. That is what they step in for. They step in to tell us, no, you can't do that, or yes, you can do that, or no, the Senate is wrong, the executive is right, et cetera, whatever it is. And I would encourage you all, again, layman's terms again, is they are not your first step. They are your last resort when you have exhausted all of your options, because then, right, they're rendering their decisions are final. The one thing I will also say, unlike you all, right, if you pass a resolution, that expires at the end of the session. When the court sets precedents, it stays there until the court overturns it. And so I think that's the other piece of their power lies beyond session to session. It stays on the books until another court decides, no, we disagree with that, and they're going to overturn it. A good prime example and I think the Chief Justice was a member of the court then, I don't really know, but a couple years ago when, no, you would not have been, I forgot. When there was a dispute about whether or not the student body president could appoint the underserved senators who have never faced election, right? There was a lot of disagreements between folks on whether or not the student body president had the power to do that, right? We sent it to the court, and they've now set precedents on every position has to face election before the student body, now vice president, can nominate to fill those seats. And so I think it's recognizing that their responsibility, but also in ways that you can utilize them as well. I would encourage you all, use them as the resource, use them as the quote unquote experts of what the law says. And again, just like state Supreme Court, US Supreme Court, they're going to tell you what the law says. They're going to tell you what you wrote, and you may not like it, but that's what they're going to tell you to do.
Yes. I would also like to clarify, this is exactly why we wanted to create these new forms. I found in the previous session, which is the only session that I have been a part of, that when people, specifically senators, were submitting a hearing request, they weren't being detailed enough on what exactly it was that they wanted from us or how it was in violation of something that fell under our jurisdiction. And so that is my biggest recommendation to you all. Please be as specific as possible as to why this falls either against the Bill of Rights, Constitution, bylaws, statutes, anything of that nature, because anything other than that, we will not accept. we are here as peacemakers in terms of like the legality of it all, but we are not here as peacemakers in conflicts just because there's a disagreement on morality or what's right and what's wrong. It has to be strictly something that's in our jurisdiction. Okay, so I just need to make sure that that is clear. And if there's any questions as to what exactly that would mean, like I said, please, please, please reach out. I know that there are a lot of questions on the Supreme Court. I was on the court last year, and I know that there were a lot of questions there, and there continue to be. I'm very excited that there's going to be a task force, and people seem like they're excited to get to work on it because it's extremely, extremely important. And I need you all to really participate and take it seriously because it's something that this government association has been severely lacking.
Are there any other questions for Chief Justice? Great, seeing none. Thank you very much for your time, Chief Justice. We really appreciate it. And we can now move on to item D, Treasurer James, your quarterly financial report.
All right, so I'm not Vice President Haas, but I forgot to ask Olivia for the meeting link, so I'm just gonna use her computer. So I'm gonna start with the budget breakdown. So salaries, we have allocated in the budget $153,960. We have expended $31,458.07. I would like to include that 40% of our advisor's salary, Advisor Fonseca, for this fiscal year is a part of that. And due to the Director of Media's job, or new addition to Director of Media, we didn't allocate a specific amount to this job. So we may go over, but we did get permission to use the reserves to fix that. And also it may change depending on how you all vote for the, redefining her hours. Office management, we have expended $6,488.03. A lot of that was for the technology budget. And we went over to purchase additional technology needs due to COVID. We had to purchase like laptops and stuff so people could work from home. So that's why that's high. Going to individual organization and summer funding, you'll see that we haven't allocated any money. Basically, just because we approve funding for people doesn't mean that they get the money. I talked to Chairperson Liu today about this. The way we allocate money for funding, they have to show us the receipts after the event or conference, and then we will allocate the money to them. So just because we approve the funding doesn't mean the funding comes out of our account yet. And then I'll scroll down to reserves, Gabe. So with the, Gabe, how did you explain this? I totally forgot.
Yeah, so one of the things with reserves that I think when you see the number, and it is a large number, it is significantly higher than we've ever rolled over in a while. All of that has to do with everything that happened in COVID. We stopped spending money in March of last year when we shut down, when campus went into quarantine to stay at home order. We stopped doing our own programming. We stopped allocating money. So we rolled over a significant chunk of money. And so when Zach and I talked about like the best way to kind of share this with you all is normally we would typically roll over about 20 to 25, 30,000 max because students don't turn in their receipts to get reimbursed, and that happens from time to time. With this reserve, we now have $107,000 in our reserves account because we rolled over 89 grand of that. We have already spent a piece of that when we approved the second rotation of the Shockers United COVID fund, and also when we spent money on purchasing masks for students when the Legislative Council voted to approve both of those expenses this summer. the one big thing that Zach and I want to, or that Treasurer James and I want to stress as much as possible is the idea of sometimes we use that money to cover other projects that the Senate wants to do, other initiatives executive wants to do. But it's very clear to also remember that because we are in COVID and we will potentially have a budget shortfall, reserves will be able to be adjusted to take care of our portion of the budget shortfall if in time there comes one. So I think just be reminded of that aspect of that number as well. We will include this in the minutes for that Speaker Rabin will send out so you can see this in hard copy from there. Did that help, Treasurer James?
Yeah, thank you for that.
Yeah.
I'm open for any questions if there are any.
Are there any questions for Treasurer James about the quarterly financial report? Senator Liu.
On the breakdown, there's the student advocate allocated budget. Can you give it a little more detail what the student advocate does with their budget?
Yeah, so correct me if I'm wrong, Gabe, but with their budget, their salary is also a part of their budget, not with the other salaries. So a lot of what comes out of that is their salary. And then they have, I believe, their office phone too. And so, yeah, those are the biggest thing that come out of the student advocates budget, along with like programming funding.
Yeah, we fund them independently of the other systems, so they have their own account that we put money in. Salaries is their biggest expense, and there is programming money, office dollars as well, because while they're in the student government's office, we treat them independently from the student government office.
Are there any other questions for Treasurer James? Great, seeing none, the student advocate, Caitlin Hammock, will now give her monthly report. Caitlin?
Okay. Oh, no. That sounds terrible. Okay, cool. Hi guys. Hope you're all doing well. I'll just keep it very short and sweet. So one of the main things that I did early on this year was changing Food for Fines to be the first week of every month so that it adds a certain level of consistency. Everyone that's involved with the program, whether it be student advocate, Shocker Support Locker, parking services, we're all on the same page every month. We know when it is, same time every month. So it makes it a lot easier. And so we had our first Food for Fines of the year in September, the first week of September. Our total amount of food items was 117. Total number of hygiene items was 21. And so it's kind of tough to compare it to previous years because we've done it at not really consistent times every year. So it's hard to compare it, but I think we did pretty well. And so it'll be the first week of every month, excluding December and January, because we'll be on our break. And so our next Food for Fines will be next week, Tuesday through Thursday, the 6th through the 8th. So if any of you all have fines, or if you know anyone who has fines, bring me your food. I've also been looking into creating a legal services program, getting that going again. I know previous student advocates have been looking into that, so I'd like to look into that more. I've been researching it, and hopefully we'll have some legislation ready about that by December, but I'll definitely keep you all updated. I've been working on creating a comprehensive list of resources that are both on campus and in the community that will go up on the student advocate page as soon as I'm done and it looks as good as I want it to. And the communications team will help me with that. So I'm very excited about that. Then I've been in conversations with Dr. Glenn May about getting information about the Office of the Student Advocate, as well as information about academic appeals on the required section of all of our syllabi. Shout out to Senator Liu for helping me out with that and our ideas. I love working with them. And I was in interviews, the final 3 interviews for the VP of Diversity, HR, and Professional Development. Asked them lots of questions, provided lots of feedback. So I think that went pretty well. I really liked all three of the candidates, so I think whoever we go with will be a really good option. And last big thing for the month, yesterday, myself and President Khan met with 2 lawyers who were hired by KBOR and the university to do an audit of the Title IX process on campus, as well as how other offices on campus that deal with issues like sexual harassment, sexual assault are working with the system. So, CAPS, student health, our WC Police Department, how all of these different systems are working together or not working together to provide services to students. So we gave honest feedback from that. But other than that, those are about the big things. I want to keep it short for you all since we're here kind of late. But if you have any questions, I'm open to them.
Are there any questions for the student advocate?
What was the feedback?
Sorry, what'd you say?
What was the feedback? You said you gave feedback. What was
the feedback?
Yeah, on addressing about CAPS and how they're working with Title IX issues, et cetera, et cetera.
Oh, okay, yeah. So when we were having our discussions with these lawyers, we basically just gave them students' opinions that we've talked to that have dealt with Title IX in particular, and students' viewpoints and reactions to different offices that deal with these issues on campus. And so then these lawyers will use the information that we gave them that hopefully, I think it represents the students pretty well. I think we did a pretty good job, but they'll use the feedback that we gave them to run an audit and make sure that everything that we're doing on campus is fully legal when in regards to federal standards, state standards, and just making sure we're doing the best for our students. I hope that answered your question.
Are there any other questions for the student advocate? Great, seeing none, thank you very much, Caitlin, for coming to speak with us. We do only have 5 minutes left in the meeting, so if you have any very important remarks and announcements, please bring those forward. Does anyone have any remarks and announcements? Senator Mounts.
I know that there's a lot of confusion surrounding the resignation of President Golden. I myself am very confused as well. So I would encourage all senators to reach out and get the feelings of their constituents in regards to the situation, just because it was very sudden and we still don't have any answers. And I don't know personally about other senators, but I feel like there's something being hidden, just considering the fact that A, he's getting a payoff, B, he has to limit his appearance on campus. And so I feel like we as senators, it is our duty to find the answers as to what happened and why there was a sudden resignation of our president, especially one that is particularly dedicated to the student experience and dedicated to listening to what students have. And if unfortunately we are not able to find answers, we need to be pushing that there is a very open process for the selection of the next president. Because I was very personally disappointed in the actions of the university and the actions of the Kansas Board of Regents when it came to selecting President Golden, and not saying that that has any indication of his job and whether he did bad or good, but they did not go about that in the best way possible. And so we need to be holding our university accountable. We need to be holding our Kansas Board of Regents accountable, because when it comes to it, we are the ones that their decisions are affecting. And we need to be as vocal as possible when it comes to those decisions. And so I just recommend that everyone reaches out, gets as much information they can as possible, especially from their students and their constituents. And that way we can be a better student government and also push for a better university as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Mount. Senator Perkins.
Sorry, guys, I'm going to keep this super quick, but I just wanted to remind you guys that we are really desperately in need of poll workers in this county. So I just put the link to the poll workers application in the chat. It takes like 3 minutes to fill out. It's just 1 day of work, $9.50 an hour. It's a great time. Please sign up. It's in the interest of our democracy. That's all.
Thank you, Senator Martin.
Oh, there we go. Just to base off of what Senator Mouse said, I'm going to make it super quick because I know we all just want to go to bed. But just like real quick, I know that at least my constituents, as far as I know, are very angry and upset. I know a lot of us have seen the picture of what happened to the Wichita State University sign, or otherwise the Koch University sign. That pretty much sums up most of my constituents and honestly my own feelings about the situation.
Are there any other remarks and announcements? Great. Make sure you submit your senator hours before midnight. That is a requirement of all senators. With that, I'm going to put the final roll call question on your iClicker. Again, any answer doesn't matter, but you do have to submit one so we can make sure that you were here. You have 1 minute. If you don't say that you're here, then you weren't here. You won't get credit for being here for the whole meeting. So go ahead and put that in. All right. Thank you all very much. Thank you all for a great meeting. I know it was a long one. Next week's will probably not be any shorter. So be ready for that. We'll have more legislation to go over, some changes to it. So be on the lookout, review your legislation really thoroughly. And I call this meeting to close at 10 p.m. Thank you all very much with a silent roll call. Everyone have a good day.
Do we need to stay? I'm assuming no.
Nope, you're good.
Bye, friends.
You just have to wait till it catches up so I can end the live stream.